G'day, mate. 40 here. So apparently we still have a live hostage situation in Vienna and 7 people dead. Also on PredictIt right now, apparently you can't vote for Donald Trump to win the election. There's been so much money that swung towards voting for Donald Trump to win this election that you can't vote straight out for Donald Trump and wager money on PredictIt right now. So everything I am seeing points towards a solid Donald Trump victory. Excellent show earlier today between attorney Robert Barnes and pollster Rich Baris.
In 20, and that'd be consistent with Gallup's numbers. So you add to that, but also if Republican turnout equalizes in all these states, because the popular vote became such a mantra. If a bunch of working class Trump voters vote no matter what they think their state's going to do, and there's signs of that in the Dakotas. Plus, I think the Norwegians are going to reward Trump big time for his anti-war position, even though he did not do the best job in his campaign, hammering that issue down the stretch.
He didn't. He really didn't.
Major miss. It looks like they are still appreciative anyway. Probably because it's the first guy since Reagan not to start a new war someplace. And really, the new guys, you could argue about
that. Shows up in our polling: Wisconsin overwhelmingly, Pennsylvania overwhelmingly, Michigan overwhelmingly. When Robert and I tailored a question, it was his idea. Which candidate do you trust more to keep you out of foreign wars? It was Trump by like 20 points almost in most states.
He's going to sweep then, folks. He's going to sweep. I know those states. So my bet right now is he sweeps all 4. I have the closest, rather than being Minnesota, though Minnesota would be
right here. You see the super chat question for you? I didn't want it to get lost before it ran out. PredictIt's got.
I've already bet the other way. I don't have Trump losing a single state he won in 2016. And that's 5-to-1 odds. Isn't that crazy?
I would have said Arizona maybe until Laura and I were just like stunned. We were watching the rest of it come in, and sometimes when we do something to fill in the sample, it tends to get maybe a little bit more moderate, a little bit more female. But it's like we put it on hyper blast basically, right? And start really firing on all channels, right? And we're looking, and it's like Maricopa's at already 62%, and there's still some and we're like, oh, well, who's left? Who's taking the survey right now, right? It's like moderate women in Maricopa, and we're like, oh, this is gonna get ugly for Donald Trump. It didn't, right? It was like Trump. We're like, what? I remember looking at the first one, and he pulled about even with Joe Biden in Maricopa, and he doesn't even need to be even. He just needs to be at a draw. But he was at even about 47.3 each after trailing Joe Biden by upwards of 6 or 5 points, whatever it was in the first poll, and then 3, and then even. And that was really, I think.
I have it closer in Arizona just because my theory is that if voter registration trends a certain way, the popular vote will too in that state, and because it's more Democratic in Arizona.
Okay, I want to get a little bit here from Greg Gutfeld from The 5.
The 5.
That's a good one.
Last night's Trump rally ended at 1 a.m., 9 hours past Dana's bedtime.
Wow, what a crowd. What a crowd. Nobody gets crowds like this. You know what gets crowds like this? Making America great again. That's what gets crowds like this. The only thing that's going to get a crowd like that.
Yep, the crowd's huge. The Trump train's longer than that wall in China. But where's Joe?
The next president of the United States of America, Joe Biden. Joe Biden. Joe Biden.
The media, as usual, is spooked by Trump's crowds, a concern missing when cities were burned by leftists attacking cops. To them, American flags are scary unless they're on fire. Meanwhile, who's having fun? All these white people.
I will vote for Donald Trump. I will vote for Donald Trump.
They're not white. There goes that narrative. The contrast between that excitement and what's heard from the media is stark. Something's up. The Dems are already questioning the election, a stunt they pioneered in 2016.
I suspect that we'll find out in 48 hours how successful these suppression tactics have been. That is the one concern that I have. The only way, in my opinion, for Joe Biden not to be successful on Tuesday is for voter suppression to be successful.
Oh, boy. So even though 100 million already voted, he screams suppression, which assures more violence if Trump wins, which they'll blame Trump for. But it was the media who started the what if he stays in the White House BS, which Trump made into a joke, chanting 12 more years. And all this crap is coming from the same dopes who started it all with a Russian collusion hoax. First, they called Trump's win a foreign concoction. Schiff had proof, they claimed. They also claimed Trump wasn't their president. So they held massive protests. Maxine.
So the Trump campaign is predicting a 2.6 million turnout in Pennsylvania. And if they get 2.6 million of their voters to the polls tomorrow, then Trump feels comfortable that they should win Pennsylvania. So they don't need 3.5, they need 2.6.
Demanded that you get into people's faces. Ignoring Trump's work for minorities, from prison reform to black colleges to jobs, they embraced mind reading. His deeds may not be evil, but we know his thoughts are. And what did that bring? Well, they chased Trump staffers out of restaurants. They showed up at homes. They doxed supporters. Celebs called for assassination and bombing the White House. And the capper? Hey, let's defund the cops. Then when the violence worsens, we can blame it on Trump again. Leftist leaders blame their city's mayhem on Trump and not their own cowardice. Then came the arson, the looting, media on Twitter shouting, burn it all down until it reached their homes. Democrat mayors hid behind the cops they wanted to defund. And soon media hacks defined looting as acceptable. The pathetic phrase, mostly peaceful, became their mockable defense. Joe Biden called Antifa an idea. As Plato understood, when you live in a cave, everything's just an idea. So now we have these huge rallies and caravans of thousands. And the press, they ask in fear, who are all these people? Well, to quote your idol, sorry, you built that. So, Dana, last night at the club, you said this to me. You said, you know, Greg, elections are like taking drugs. You want it to peak exactly at the right time, which Trump is a master at.
I mean, and I have a lot of experience with drugs, and that's why, you know, you listen to me when it comes to that, because, I mean, honestly, if you were going to ask somebody, like, just when you want that high to hit,
Yes.
I'm the perfect person to come to.
Yeah.
And, you know, President Trump is closing, like, maybe it's at the right, he's at the right place at the right time. I was thinking about how another narrative that you heard over the years was that President Trump doesn't really want to win.
Mm-hmm.
This is just all for.
Oh, there goes the other side. Well, that's just not realistic.
And it's possible, either way, that we don't get to that point where the legal challenges don't have to be used. Because
And Jacko says there's such nonstop propaganda in Finland over how Biden must win so that we can get American support against Russia. I didn't care much about this race before, but now I definitely want Trump to
somebody
win.
has declared the winner.
I hope so, because I don't want to have to get involved in this. The problem here is time. It's like the more time there is in which we don't know, the more unrest can occur. And we knew that could happen. And what we knew, smart people do is they plan ahead. And we were talking about this in the break. Every place in Georgetown and every place in New York is being boarded up. Why? Because they are preparing for the worst. But somehow the politicians couldn't get together to prepare for the worst if something is close. I mean, if you see something coming, can't you do anything about it? And I mean, let's face it, Trump was ridiculed for talking about, like, the problems with the mail-ins. And now you have the Democrats talking about it. And it's like, you know what? Maybe we should have listened to the guy. He hasn't been wrong yet. ever. What about, you quote me on that, America?
What about Clyburn saying about suppression yesterday, talking about suppressing the vote?
Well, I think, like to Juan's point, for black voters, it has been very true for them in some places, right? And they're not going to have any senators, just a moratorium on that. The other thing for Elizabeth Warren is she would be up for re-election in 2022. There's a Republican governor in Massachusetts. If the Senate is going to be held by Republicans, barely even, no, but if the Republicans are going to hold on, then why would they risk having the governor of Massachusetts replace Elizabeth Warren as with a Republican so that she could be the Secretary of the Treasury? But that's going to just give them no end of headaches. So I thought it was super smart.
Yeah.
Greg, you know what would be really smart? The Trump campaign just cuts an ad of that far-left Zoom call.
Oh, yes.
And just says, this is coming.
Yeah, I was looking at Bernie with the squad. It was like a communist version of Charlie's Angels. Sanders is Charlie's, and those are the Angels. And every hour, there's like a little plot where they try to undermine America with socialist principles. Let's tax. Let's steal. All right. By the way, just to clarify.
Ban fracking.
And ban fracking. Just to clarify, Joe did say there's no way he's going to put Bernie and Liz in the cabinet, but he was thinking about an actual one.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to be clear. But Bernie looks at Joe the way Dr. Frankenstein looked at his monster. He sees it as his creation. It's just a cobbling together of all of these left-wing body parts, and maybe it'll kind of move down into the city and change things before it collapses and Kamala Harris takes over.
The Biden campaign, Brett, can't be happy when they see a Zoom call like that. These people plotting for how they're going to influence the new administration.
No, as you're making your close that you're going to be the president of all America, and the progressives are fighting over what policies they're going to affect. I think the Secretary of Treasury, Elizabeth Warren, pitch really was not the best close for the Biden campaign, especially for independents. I do think that Attorney General Amy Klobuchar could be upset with this decision if, in fact, Joe Biden becomes president. I'm saying Senator Klobuchar being considered. But I think that this is a reminder for people in the middle or center left or disaffected Republicans that that is a possibility. And the Biden campaign had to stop it, and they had to do something quickly, and they did.
Juan, was there anything the Biden campaign could have done to kind of stop these people from jockeying for position so openly on the eve of this election? I mean, they could have waited a week or two, right?
No, why? I don't get it. Why would you want to stop?
It just doesn't look very good when you have all these socialists plotting a takeover of your administration.
I must say, I noticed, the stock market today. I know you're very concerned.
To a prison state.
Brett, last night, the president was at a rally, and as they began chanting, fire Fauci, he suggested he might do that after the election. Is that a good strategy?
As good as talking about Secretary of Treasury Elizabeth Warren.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about equal.
Critics call those rallies super spreader events for the virus. Biden obviously likes to have a distance with the cars and the honking. Which image do you think has worked best in this campaign?
Well, media loves the phrase super spreader, but I just want to point out, when we do a show, we get these files and we get these things, and they have all of our all the stuff that we're supposed to read. Every day that we do this about COVID, there's a very important detail in there nobody brings up. The infection fatality rate keeps dropping.
Yep.
That's the most important thing. Now, the media won't tell you that because that doesn't help Biden. And if you report that, then you help Trump, that the infection fatality rate is going down and will continue to go down. A lot of that is because as this, okay, so you go, well, there are all these new cases. Well, there's new cases because we're testing. Testing is finding the new cases. The infection fatality rate drops. That has to be told again and again. It drives me crazy that we really don't. But I want to give the five a slap on the back because we talked about, that's good, right? Pat on the back. That comes later. We predicted this debate would come down to the lockdown versus no lockdown. Probably 5 months ago when the lockdown started, we said sooner or later we're going to have to calculate how many lives are saved by a lockdown versus lost. And it was such a cold calculation that nobody likes to do it. But we actually argued about it. We said, like, okay, here's an adult argument. Drug overdoses, right? Suicides, depression. What does unemployment lead to? What about rising crime, which we saw? Oddly enough, ironically, car accidents have gone up in some cities because people are speeding more. Pedestrian deaths are at a high in New York City because pedestrians are getting hit by the speeding cars. So we have actually had this discussion many times. And Trump has always been kind of one step ahead because as an optimist, he thinks that we're going to get back to work. We're going to get back to work because we will. It is time for us to have this discussion, but Joe can't have it because he's stuck on one variable. He's the generic candidate that can't come up with a plan. And we need to have somebody who says, we're Americans, we're going to get back to work. There are costs and there are benefits. We have to embrace that. That's what adults do.
Right, but is there a Trump plan?
I think we've seen
marijuana. And Oregon could become the first state to decriminalize hard drugs. Instead of jail time, possession of small amounts of heroin, cocaine, and LSD would result in fines or attending addiction recovery centers. Voters could also legalize so-called magic mushrooms in that state, which I've just learned the technical term for that. Now, I saw a 60 Minutes piece about magic mushrooms and their help for people that have PTSD.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
What's the technical name, Dana?
Psilocybin? Psilocybin?
Psilocybin?
I don't know. It starts with a P-S-I-L-O.
Yeah, it's a lot of words. A lot of letters. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I don't know.
I'm so high right now.
Is the magic mushroom, is that the one that helps PTSD?
Here's the thing, and I'll give you my argument using psilocybin as an example. Psilocybin is incredibly powerful, hallucinogenic. And if you take it with your friends and it could be the worst possible night of your life. But if you take it under supervision and it's a controlled substance, it could be the most amazing time of your life. And that's why decriminalization, I think, is important, because once you take substances and regulate them not by law, but by packaging and dosing, so that there's an enterprise that is actually doing the right measures and making sure it's pure and clean, you have a substance that is effectively safe. Almost, I haven't done the research in like 2 years, but almost all of the opiate overdoses were due to fentanyl-laced drugs purchased on the streets from China. It wasn't prescription Percocets or OxyContin that were killing people. So just one analogy, imagine if nicotine was illegal and you couldn't buy 20 cigarettes, but you could go on the street and buy one cigarette that had the strength of a carton. That's how we buy drugs on the street. And I mean Dana and her husband Peter.
So I have long been conflicted about legalization of any drug.
So I was watching this, reading this book, Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic by Sam Quinones. The book came out in 2015. And I got to say, this will sound mean and harsh, but everybody who got addicted to drugs, it seemed overwhelmingly that this was a symptom that they had a life that didn't work. They were on, kind of a downward trajectory. And I did read in this book about people who are on an upward trajectory and they got addicted to drugs. So America's opiate epidemic, I think, is primarily a symptom of an emptiness in much of America, because I didn't see people with full, healthy lives who are getting hooked on opiates. Do you know anyone with a full, healthy life who got hooked on opiates? It was people who wanted to escape and distract themselves from their lives. In other words, losers, who are the ones who are getting hooked on opiates, and they could just as well have gotten hooked on porn or some other destructive substance or process. So to me, America's opiate epidemic is a symptom of an inner emptiness in a portion of America, rather than primarily being a problem with the particular substance. Okay, this is Robert Barnes and Rich Baris.
Arizona, I think, will be closer, but he had a cushion to begin with. The only caveat to that was, when we were discussing it when you polled Arizona, the two reasons why Arizona, he could expand his ballot edge despite that, is because if you look at the voter registration model that one guy did, Arizona, Trump underperformed the voter registration model in Arizona. It was the only state he did. And the reason for it, in my view, was is you have two groups unique in Arizona. You had Mormon voters who didn't like Trump.
And chat says many of these opiate documents are being prescribed for pain. Yeah. But not everybody who was prescribed opiates for pain gets hooked. It's just that every example of which I'm aware, people were using the drugs to distract from an inner emptiness. I just never read about people who are leading a good life, a life that works, a life filled with people and human connection, and then they get a prescription and they go nuts. I just don't read about that. It's always losers. How come it's always losers who get hooked and died when they take opiates?
Trump. And that group is coming back to Trump, and where Gary Johnson got an unusually high vote.
Yeah.
And the second group, now this group is still against him, but it's the old McCain never.
And the chat says, well, many doctors overprescribed for pain. But you could dump a truckload of cocaine outside my door. I would not use any cocaine. I could have doctors overprescribing me opiates, and I'm not going to use opiates for recreation. I don't do drugs. I don't mess with prescription drugs for recreation. I just take a very safe drug, modafinil, which is about the safest drug out there. It has no addictive qualities. It has no street value. It has no high. You just perform at a higher level. So I don't see the problem being the doctors overprescribing. I don't see the problem being the substance, just as I don't see alcoholism being primarily a matter of drinking alcohol. I see alcoholism and getting addicted to opiates or getting addicted to porn. To me, these are all symptoms of a life that doesn't work. And so people try to distract themselves from reality.
For Trump type in Arizona. That's
about 7%. It looks like about 7%.
That's why he'll never get net crossover votes in Arizona.
No,
Democrats are very, very locked in, and there's at least a.
And the chat suggests Heath Ledger died of a drug overdose. Did he have a great life? The guy was filled with inner torment. He was not a happy man. And so happy people don't do heroin. Happy people don't do recreational drugs like opiates and black tar, heroin, etc. Newsflash, most big Hollywood stars are not particularly happy people. Most talk show hosts are not particularly happy people.
But he won't do as bad as he did in 2016 because he'll get some of those. I think he lost double digits.
And Jim, you keep asking me the same question. If a person converts to Judaism, are they required to be circumcised? Yeah, if it's a man, he's required to be circumcised if he converts to a traditional form of Judaism. If it's some kind of liberal, watered-down version, then possibly they're not as rigorous in that requirement. But yes. Now, most people growing up in America and in other countries, most men are circumcised at birth. So then it's just a ritual circumcision. That's what I had, a ritual circumcision, because I was circumcised at birth. So the rabbi just takes a drop of blood. It's called a Hatafatdam ceremony.
Republicans in Arizona.
I think 11%, right? 11%.
A poor big portion of that were those Mormons that didn't like Trump. They're coming home. So you bring in the Mormons, and then you add the fact that the number one group he's trending with of any demographic is Mexican Americans and Hispanics compared to 2016. By the way, Henry Olsen made the same mistake as everybody else. He's comparing the post-election.
And the chat asked, where do you get modafinil? Google it. Google it. Like it's pretty easy to find places where you can get it. And legally you require a prescription, but it's about the lowest, least regulated type of drug around because there's such a tiny chance of anything bad happening with it.
Election Pew polls
yes.
To the pre-election results. He's like, Trump is way down with working class whites. No, he's not. He was never down with. He's doing better with working class whites in the same polls, using the same methods at the same time frame as 2016.
That's
they
right.
Missed working class whites.
They
in those
keep
polls.
doing this, Robert. They keep comparing, and the suburban vote is the same thing. We had him consistently at 43, 45 in the Twin City suburbs, right where he is right now in our Minnesota poll. He won them 47, 45. Now, maybe he won't this time because of the third party drop off. Maybe not. We don't know. But same thing with Wisconsin. We had him about tied in Wisconsin in the suburbs, and the only reason why it was a tied poll is because his rural vote was so high. Now he's getting that high rural vote, and he's actually doing a little bit better in some urban areas. But the bottom line is, this is not, they're comparing polls to results. And the polls in 16 never predicted Donald Trump was going to win the suburbs. That was a stunner, folks. That's part of the reason. And again, our shy questions clearly identify those are the shy voters for the most part, or a large chunk of them. They are the shy voters.
Exactly. And there's more shy voters this cycle than there was in 2016.
Oh, there's no doubt.
More off than they were in 2016. So so that's where Henry Olsen just completely missed it. But basically, when you go look at Arizona, there was a cushion for Trump of some voters that were going to come back for him, that weren't those Mormon voters coming back for him, and in such a big Mexican American vote. If even the Mexican American vote was going to be a higher share of the vote, which by the way in Texas it looks like it's not going to be a higher share. That's how bad the turnout is amongst Mexican American voters in Texas. The whole reason that state's trending Democratic, contrary to conventional wisdom, that it's the people coming in from outside the state. That's not why. It's because the number of Mexican American voters who are 2-to-1 Democratic, their share of the vote keeps going up and up.
Well, let's go ahead and answer this guy in Nevada before he has a coronary, and then I want to move on to Pennsylvania.
Okay, so terrorists still on the loose in Vienna. I believe there's still an ongoing hostage situation. Reports of up to 7 dead in this terrorist attack in Vienna. So we'll keep an eye on that story. In addition to the U.S. election,
because there was a lot of questions about the Senate races, and let's hit them because we're burning through. I got
and the House to go through.
Okay, yeah. So what do you think? So Target Smart, I would caution you guys, but
that's the model.
Target Smart, honestly.
Yeah, the model data is 6,000. The Democratic data, I think, is around 40,000.
Yeah.
But that's what it was in 2016 with fewer voters. So that's their problem. If the polls are accurate, if either the New York Times poll or the YouGov poll of Nevada is accurate,
He'll be ahead on election day.
then yes, the Republican edge that's expected on election day is 60,000. So that means net 20,000 Republican edge. But John Ralston isn't dealing with this. He'll hint at it. He'll say, maybe there'll be big Republican turnout, but he hasn't. Not a single one of the Democratic data analysts addressed the polls in saying, here's what the poll said was going to happen in the early vote. Did it happen? No, it didn't happen anywhere. And they were everybody was probably one of the worst. But in the end, it made sense. It's like, how could Nevada go from +2.5 Democrat to Trump winning if he's not moving the national popular vote by 3 points or more? It's because of the demographics of Nevada. Nevada has almost no post-college educated voters. That's the big trending Democratic group, only 7% population in Nevada. So number two, the Democratic group that is most trending Trump is overrepresented in Nevada. Mexican-American voters, about 20% of the vote, give or take. They're moving 10 points more towards Trump by every poll, even the media polls in Nevada, such that their increased share of the vote won't matter. And by the way, they may not have an increased share of the vote, but it may not matter if Trump's doing 10 points or more better amongst them.
Much anyway, right.
Okay, so apparently more than 1,000 people are stuck inside the Vienna Opera House. So 6 locations attacked this evening. More than 1,000 people are hostages in this terror attack. Wow, in Vienna.
There's a big Mormon vote, 5% of the vote trended against Trump, went to Gary Johnson. That vote was going to come home. So those turnout factors, the demographics of the state, and having above average Trump trending groups, below average anti-Trump trending groups, and how the turnout has turned out. It also may be the case that Harry Reid not being in the Senate made a bigger difference. Plus the lockdown here. I think the lockdown's more unpopular than people realize. But
you're not the first one to tell me in Nevada that there are people. I'm talking about Clark County. There are people who are, typical Democrats. Like, they're killing me. I can't live.
The other big factor here is the lockdown shut down a lot of the economies. There are a good number of voters that moved out of the state that were Democratic-leaning voters. Big problem is no Harry Reid machine, just his acolytes who may not be anything as powerful as his machine was. Look at the history of machines. When a real popular leader of that machine goes away, the machine tends to fray. And even though he was leaving, he was still around in 2016. And here's another example of that. There was a preview of that in the caucuses. Remember, Harry Reid hand-delivered Nevada to Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Absolutely.
Even though exit polls and others said that Bernie likely won the real vote. And there was ways he rigged the caucuses, which was smart. I'll tell people that story.
Yeah, you can do that. And
my little sister actually lived it.
They flipped out, man.
They did all kinds of crazy stuff here. But notice in 2020, Bernie crushed here in the caucuses. So that may have been a sign that Biden's machine was, Harry Reid's machine was nowhere near as powerful as it used to be.
He put it in the gear for him. It did not come through. Remember, they were even going to get, huge black shares out of nowhere, and Bernie was doing well with them.
He did well in the old black machine precincts, but it wasn't consistent. In other words, if you had an African American precinct that didn't have a local political machine in that precinct, its votes splintered everywhere. So that didn't happen when Harry Reid was here. So so that's problem one. They don't have the same machine. Problem two is the culinary union is not really doing anything. Because the economy is so crushed here, the culinary union is just not very active. So that's always been. Remember, people used to vote at the casinos on election day here. That's not happening this time. So in any major number. So that's a huge problem. There are people who are just so convenient to vote because you showed up to work and then your work time to come over and vote, and that's not happening.
Do your duty, boy. Let's go.
Exactly. Well, and then the third thing is, to his credit, Adam Laxalt and others have been on top of it here, and the Trump campaign has been on top of it here. So they sued over a week ago to get access to watching the early vote count.
Yeah.
And even though they didn't get their remedy, it may have worked. In other words, they may have been sufficiently nervous to be like, we'll just run this clean. So I think all of those factors combined, if he gets an honest vote, Trump will win Nevada. That's my forecast.
Wow, that's a big forecast. All right, let me bring up something in Pennsylvania before we skirt over. And I will say, just as a real quick brief, everybody thought Joni Ernst, and I'll pivot right after this. Everybody thought Joni Ernst had made a bad political calculation by embracing Donald Trump. It was the only calculation. Only a stupid DC idiot, like, somebody whose initials are DW, would think that was going to work. You can't walk the fence in a state the president carried by, you can't straddle the fence in a state the president carried by 10 points and was probably in all likelihood, like I told you when we polled it, and it was closer than Ohio. It still wasn't really close. So I really didn't understand where Ann came up with that, but I respect her. It's her state. You know what I mean? We couldn't get any closer than Trump +3, but it wasn't like Trump +10 a month and a half before, which was killer. Now it's going to be. 7 is probably light. She was light last time. So that's one seat that is off the table. Joni Ernst is going to win that race. The demographic shift in that last couple of weeks, Robert, forget it. She's got a huge election day lead. They will vote on election day. And Democrats, by the way, likely many of them will not, because it wasn't only the strategy that they employed, but listen.
He's great. He's doing a great job. He said it was not produced by Russia. So. But that's what they try and do. They do disinformation. They're the biggest disinformation group, I'll tell you. They own him. They control Biden.
Remember when Lindsey Graham fought for Judge Kavanaugh? Saving Brett Kavanaugh's not.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on Donald Trump, see if anything newsworthy comes up.
Predictive indicators, more than polling, primary vote shares matter. And Joe Biden did a terrible job in Iowa. He met voters face to face, and they didn't like him. They rejected him. Iowans are very good at that.
Third straight time they've done so too.
Third straight time.
Third time was not. They told him 1988 take a hike. They told him in 2008.
Okay, we have these federal employees and bureaucrats on the camera planning a coup in Washington, D.C. So we've got recordings.
Decisions are in your immediate sphere of influence as somebody who works in the government.
I'm a management and programs analyst.
I work in the national security community.
I spent 3.5 years as a contractor at DHS HQ.
If you read the mainstream press, like they all have Signal accounts, text them, leak everything you can. The journalists I've dealt with have been super ethical in ways to shield me, to be the source of the leaks.
Groups on the outside being able to show solidarity with federal workers.
Making sure that we're naming what is happening as a coup.
Totally agreed. In the shutdown DC conversations that I've been having, and that's not on the federal side, we also are often saying, like, call it a coup. It's a coup. Don't let anyone tell you it's not.
President Harry S. Truman famously said, "I thought I was the president, but when it comes to these bureaucrats, I can't do a damn thing." So the bottom line with this is that we all, as ordinary people and as federal workers, have power. If masses of people engage in non-cooperation, no ruler can stay in power. Bureaucracy is a really powerful pillar. And, federal workers have unparalleled familiarity with the bureaucratic process. They know how to speed things up. They know how to slow them down. They have access to critical information about policies that are being considered and implemented. They can participate in internal decision-making. They can provide or deny knowledge and expertise that those at the top of the bureaucratic totem pole need. It ultimately comes down to individual decisions and personal choice. Deciding what to do or what not to do is a very personal decision. It's based on context. It's based on your rank, on your tolerance for risk.
Okay, a whole string of videos here by federal
on your tolerance
bureaucrats.
for risk, on your preparation, and frankly, where you sit in the federal bureaucracy. And we're talking about the range of different tactics. We talk about acts of commission and acts of omission. And another act of commission, albeit highly, risky, and there are a number of great downsides, is leaking. So leaking information about pending or actual policies with journalists, with activists, influential people on the outside. So another act of commission is creating parallel structures or self-organizing units. So organizing in the office place, in the workplace.
As an attorney in the federal government, I am finding the chat suggestions very interesting, and I just do want to remind people that we lose our status as federal employees if we strike.
And there's been a little conversation going on here, for example, about Black Lives Matter and how that is an example of a nonpartisan political statement. I guess that's been previously litigated, but whether or not you do a misdemeanor or an infraction on federal property or on public property really doesn't affect most of the jobs that you would be considered for, just as a sideline note.
Yeah, okay. As an attorney, I think we're highly, that's one of the things we have to be careful about.
I would just say this is also the importance of being in communication with and in touch with groups, civic groups, grassroots groups that are preparing people for the possibility that red lines may be crossed, that the election goes sideways, so everything from choose democracy to hold the line, to shut down, we count on us. I listed a few of those in the slides earlier, but they're the ones who are really in the vanguard of helping people think about, interpret red lines, and think about different actions that can be taken well beyond kind of street protests and demonstrations, but kind of sustained organizing and action.
These federal bureaucrats plotting a coup if Trump wins again. Now, I'm looking at news coverage of what's going on in Vienna. The Guardian reports graphic and unconfirmed videos are being shared around social media showing people shot and bleeding near the outside tables of local restaurants. Vienna police have urgently and repeatedly asked that no video or photographs be shared on social media. The Interior Minister suggested some attackers may still be mobile. Therefore, providing any information on social media about their whereabouts of police locations could be dangerous. And the Vienna police says if you have footage of any kind of the shooting incident in the inner city of Vienna, please upload it to this link. Don't share it on social media. That way you can support us. Well, do you trust them? I understand the point of view, and I understand the downside, but also we know that politicians in general want to downplay certain forms of terrorism. They want to hoard information to themselves. They don't believe that we are worthy of having information, that only the elites should possess information. So do you fundamentally trust politicians and police in Vienna to do the right thing? I mean, I used to instinctively trust the police and trust the FBI. And then over the past few years, I've become much more suspicious of groups such as the FBI and many within the CIA. And also, as I've done research, there are bad apples among cops. So I know European politicians want to limit free speech. They don't believe that people should be allowed to talk freely about what's going on.
What does it look like in practical terms to put, to slow the gears down in some ways or another?
At the Department of Labor, it takes the form of several rounds of the cost-benefit analysis for a new regulation. And when people were cheating on the numbers, a copy of that draft got leaked to the Daily Labor Report, and it got published, and it got sent to a congressperson. And the Office of Inspector General opened an investigation on who was cheating on the numbers. So again, that's sort of a combination of tactics. It's making a really good paper trail. It's making sure that that document got out to someone who could make use of it, and then Congress getting the Office of Inspector General involved. It was really a way to stop that thing just in its tracks, and it worked.
Organizing an action.
What does it look like in practical terms to put,
together a list of things we want to know about in the city? So where are all the police stations? Because it's good to know where the police are. Where are all the key government buildings? Where are all the media outlets? Who are the Trump boosters? So we're talking about what would it take to surround the White House and have people do stuff. We can divide it up easily with affinity groups. We have to be willing to put our bodies on the line and take on some discomfort, sacrifice, risk in order to change things. And I've been in conversations where people have never thought about having a gun or like, should I have a gun? But I think we have to know, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about what do we do when guns are in the mix. So again, chaos is a soup by which change emerges. Let's get cooking. Again, we didn't cause the war. We didn't ask for this war. Many of us are here because we want to fight it. We want something different. What are we willing to do? Right? Because again, we're not dealing with people with just simple guns. We're dealing with people with AK-47s, multiple rounds, a lot of shootings. So, we are going to be in a crisis, but we want it to be one that we are creating. We want to make sure that we are on the offense and not the defense. We want them to be responding to us and us not responding to them. In a situation of a coup or an insurrection or an uprising, whoever's got the guns often can win. We should be clear, like, it's got to go. Trump's got to go. In order to achieve what they did, they knew they had to take over important government buildings. They knew they had to try and win over members of the police and army, and they had to protect each other. I think we don't have a lot of experience taking over government buildings, and we might need to think about that. And I know, as I said earlier, how, we may find ourselves in the streets with people with different tactics than ours, but there may be some people that are willing to break the windows to get into the government buildings. If that's what we need to do, then we shouldn't fight about that.
Okay, so those are some videos of government bureaucrats trying to plot a coup against Donald Trump.
We brought you President Trump in Traverse City, Michigan. We'll dip back in there in a bit, and we're also going to take you to a Biden event in Pittsburgh later on here on Fox News Channel. We welcome in senior political analyst Brit Hume, always an integral part of our election coverage for years and years. Good evening, Brit.
Hi, Brit.
What's your thought, on this election eve and where things stand?
Well, it appears to me that Donald Trump has made up some ground, but it's impossible to tell at this stage, Brett, whether this is simply the natural tightening that we see in presidential races and many other races as well as you get down to the very end of the campaign. Probably that's what it is, but it's not impossible that what we're witnessing here is a surge of support for him that might be enough to carry him through to victory. Obviously, there's no way to tell, but we see these signs of things that we haven't seen before. That Iowa poll on Sunday that came from the highly reputable Des Moines Register pollster that had Trump suddenly 7 points up. What's that all about? And then, of course, we have these spontaneous demonstrations of support for Trump in the form of these motor caravans that are happening all over the country, not organized by the campaign. So there's an enthusiasm factor here, but it's really unclear whether it would be enough to bring him from behind.
Yeah, it seems like the window is there for President Trump. It depends on the electorate that shows up tomorrow. But the possibility that it ends in Philadelphia, say Harrisburg or Pennsylvania, in some kind of legal battle brings us back to Tallahassee, Florida in 2000. You sent me to cover that. Let's take a little listen to that. New development tonight in the fight for Florida's 25 electoral votes and the White House. Sources close to Florida Secretary of State Katherine Harris say she has decided to stand firm on a Tuesday 5 p.m. deadline to certify all county results, which means counties not finished with their hand recounts would be voided, and this race could be over. Where's that guy? Bouncing around courtrooms.
You look more like yourself then than I do like myself then.
But are you thinking that we could have another Tallahassee?
Well, it looks like there could be legal challenges in Pennsylvania. Of course, as you recall, Brett, when that happened in Florida, they broke out all over the state as results were being had been counted, but that recounts were being sought by the Democrats in the parts of the state where they thought they would harvest some previously undiscovered votes. They didn't want to recount in the places where they didn't think that. And the battle raged, as you remember, Brett, for 37 days before it was finally settled when the Supreme Court said this is not being done properly and called it all off. At that point, George W. Bush, who had been declared the winner on election night, was the winner, and all later recounts done by private organizations and so forth vindicated that decision by the Supreme Court. But it was a tense and intense time, and it was a big day, as you may recall, Brett, for Fox News, because we thought early that this was a big deal, and we sent you and Jim Bangle to do the legal cases, which you guys did a great job of, and we sent others to the state of Florida, and we just about dropped covering the campaigns, and it did a lot for our audience response then, and it was a good job well done that I think helped us with the audience. I remember it vividly. I remember staying up late at night reading Florida case law on the internet, which may sound slightly insane, but it was an insane time.
Well, get your Pennsylvania law ready. Who knows? Brett, as always, thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Brett.
Up next, we take you to the second largest voting jurisdiction in the country.
Okay, we'll keep on an eye on all the news, Trump's latest rallies. Here is Attorney Robert Barnes talking with Pollster Rich Baris.
Hey, take a hike. They told him in 2020, take a hike. By the way, as did New Hampshire.
That's right.
Somehow completely missed by the media and the polling analysts and the rest.
Nate only had +3 Biden, dude. Considering his polling bias, which is about 5-6 points at this point.
That's the youth vote, folks, so far in New Hampshire. 4% of the vote.
Yeah.
Trump lost it by 3,000 votes.
That's it.
Because of that youth vote being gone,
that's
one Trump the election. Biden has to do better, 5 to 10 points better in the southern suburbs for him to hold New Hampshire. And I'm not so certain that's going to happen. Basham has New Hampshire going to Trump. Like I say, the same map as me, just he adds Nevada, and I'm at 50-50 right now in Nevada. But though I'm leaning more and more because, again, I thought it would be D+6 in the early vote, and then it would be close. It's D+3. I mean, if it's R-1, R-2, and the big problem that John Rawson said it would take a miracle for Trump to win. He's going to have burned up his credibility in this one because he'd accurate. What people had missed is, other than 2014, where he accurately forecast Republicans doing well, but that was an easy election to forecast that due to the massive Republican edge in early voting. Every other election, he's been able to call it for Democrats, so it wasn't like he was necessarily that accurate, but he had been at least a little bit more objective before this one in terms of the early vote calculus. He's hedged a little bit, but not to the degree he needed to. I think he'll have damaged his credibility, just as he damaged it by predicting Democrats would dominate voter registration.
1 or 2 points he's damaged it, because the way he's talking, he did, though, knock the 6-point Biden lead. He did. There's no doubt. He knocked Nate's. He was like, +6 is not happening. All right. That's what he tweeted that the other day.
Is there any significance that you can't bet on Trump straight up to win on PredictIt? There's so much money that has flooded into PredictIt wanting to bet on Trump straight up that you can no longer make that bet.
I don't know what other. We talk Minnesota Senate seat, but in Pennsylvania, Robert, Lackawanna County is the Democratic stronghold, and Biden is supposedly the hometown Scranton boy. All right. We have consistently been polling Pennsylvania now. I've been polling it since the end of summer. All right. And they have traded leads there. Traded leads. Trump I think people, because a lot of people are like, I don't know. That sounds a little bit too favorable. It's important to note, he almost took Lackawanna last time. Monroe is on the cusp. I think Monroe's going. I do. And I think Luzerne is probably going to be 20, 25 points Trump. I have right now, as of last night, Lackawanna, who Biden was just leading 52-47. So something happened. All right. Something actively happened. I don't know what it is, but something actively happened. The rise in the number of people who say they've heard about the Biden reports, that's gone up. Maybe I don't, that's in the 80s now. Maybe that's it. I don't know. And it's among older voters, but we got, it's, it's good. It's a small sample comparatively, but we got them up 48-44.
That would surprise me. Basham also reported it in the Midwest. And people can look up the polling results. I think it's in the Sunday Express, the UK Sunday Express. Has the Patrick Basham final numbers for Trump, but they reported unusually high numbers, well, at least compared to what they expected for the Hunter Biden story too. And that everybody hears the story. The key with that story was just get it out enough for people to attach the word corruption to Joe Biden. That's it. Trump didn't need to do any more than you don't need people to know the breakdown of the story. You just need people to know corruption, Biden. That's the
right.
And I think Trump, what helped up there was all those rallies. So because what people don't realize with the rallies is local news covers any rally that occurs.
Yeah.
So do interviews with local news. So what happens is, particularly your older voter, because you're saying it's the older voter in particular, your older voter is who watches
the 90s now.
Yeah, they watch your local news. And so what happened is over the last week, all of Trump's rallies in every single media market in Pennsylvania meant that all your ABC, your CBS, your NBC, your local Fox affiliate, they all reported Trump talking about that. It's the only, if you're a local reporter, what's the new angle? It can't be just Trump's here. It's going to be Trump accuses Biden of scandal, Hunter Biden, that's what it will be. And so that's why he hit those. That's why those local rallies are secondarily important. Like people are wondering, why does Biden even do a local rally? I think it's kind of still a mistake, but it's so he can interview local press.
Okay, 15 people in hospital with gunshot wounds, 7 heavily injured. One good sign, no new hospital admissions for 2 hours now. Manhunt ongoing. People told to check the news before leaving home tomorrow. So I'm not seeing any official reports, any mainstream media reporting hostages being held any longer. So police managed to eliminate one of the attackers 97 meters from where he shot a man opposite a synagogue. And that attack has been widely shared on social media.
Press, but they're doing it in that moronic pandemic-induced way. I get trying to communicate, be afraid. But when you're Biden and you're being accused of corruption, you having an interview with a guy 100 feet apart from you just reinforces what are you scared of? Why are you? Yeah. Even though you're trying to talk about the pandemic, the visual is this guy wants.
Okay, let's listen to Trump here.
Manifesto, I call it. You have to see what's in that one. Joe Biden is promising to delay the vaccine and turn America into a prison state. That's what he wants. Locking you in your home while letting the far left rioters, so the rioters and the looters, the anarchists, Antifa, they can go knock the hell out of you, roam your streets, set your stores on fire. No problem. That's called protesting. We must protect our protesters. But you're not allowed to go to church. You're not allowed to have dinner, right? The only one allowed to have dinner in this state is the husband of your governor.
You can worry about what could happen tomorrow.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, man. All right, Barnes and Baris
wants to keep a distance from the press. This guy wants to keep away from questions. It's bad visuals if you understand visual methods of persuasion. But that's the other reason why Trump did it with all of these rallies, is to reinforce to the local media market. And Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, first time they've endorsed Trump. I think if a Republican in forever, they endorsed Trump.
1972, my friend, since 1972. And we do have him touching 40% in Allegheny now. He's there. So that does not include anyone who read the Pittsburgh Gazette. He just got there. And for on-off, yes. That's what I'm saying. Our Pennsylvania now, when it updates, it'll be 48-48, basically.
The only way Biden could lose Pennsylvania and still win the election is he's got to hold all the other states and he's got to flip.
Okay, I like what Trump is saying. So let's play some more from Donald Trump here.
He still doesn't know why. He's saying, let's see, why did I do that? He wished he didn't do it, I'll tell you that. In 2016, Michigan voted to fire this corrupt political establishment, and you elected an outsider as president who finally put America first. And if I don't sound like a typical Washington politician, it's because I'm not a politician. Probably wouldn't be here if I were. 3.5 million from, can you imagine that? And they refuse to even discuss it. They don't want to discuss it. There is no proof. They now say the laptop from hell was produced by Russia. This was Schiff, Watermelon Head, right? The laptop was produced by Russia. And we say, oh, no, not again. No, John Ratcliffe came out immediately. He's great. He's doing a great job. He said it was not produced by Russia. So. But that's what they try to do. They do disinformation. They're the biggest disinformation group, I'll tell you.
This is
they
Trump
own him.
in Michigan.
They control Biden,
Live.
and they know he will always do whatever they want. They know that. That's why they want him. I definitely don't do what they want. I definitely don't. Except I do one thing. I get them good ratings. Can you imagine if they don't have me? Let's say they had Biden. Their ratings will collapse. Every one of them will be out of business. They'll be out of business so fast. Every corrupt they will be out of business so fast. In fact, I think they're going to get together. The New York Times will die. The failing New York Times, Washington Post, which is basically a lobbyist for Bezos, you know that. But they'll all get together and they'll say, listen, we made a big mistake here. We got to draft Trump. We got to get him to run again. This is no good. We're dying. Nobody cares. Can you imagine that having Biden? We're going to put something up. Can you imagine having Biden as your president? The biggest loser will be the fake news media. That will be so boring. You know, their ratings are through the roof. Everything's through the roof. The NFL is doing very badly. You know why everyone's watching politics? Because they find politics to be much rougher than the NFL. It's much dirtier and more disgusting, and they don't change. You know, the NFL, they change the rules. They make everything like coming back. You can't touch anybody. Somebody tackles too hard. They say 15-yard penalty and you're out of the game and you're out for the season. You know, in the old days, right? It was a little different, but it's still tough. But this is much tougher. And people see it. But you have to see the ratings. That's why the ratings are bad for a lot of the sports. Nobody ever thought of this, but I thought of it. A couple of people wrote it. The ratings are bad because so many people are watching this. It's tougher. It's true. But they're going to be calling for us. Please, please run again. We think we're going to endorse. I got endorsed by the Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I got endorsed first time since 1972 that they endorsed, right? That's a big deal. Big newspaper, very good, very liberal newspaper, but that's okay. But first time since 1972 that they endorsed a Republican, so it's an honor. And if you don't read the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, it was one of the best endorsements. Yes, we don't like him. Yes, he has a horrible personality. But listen to this. It's not that I do, but I have been under siege illegally for 3.5 years. I've been fighting for 3.5 years, and I said to somebody today, I wonder what it would be like if the fake Russia hoax and all this crap with the impeachment over nothing, over a phone call, that was perfect. That was perfect. I wonder what it would be like if we didn't have all of this horrible stuff, and if it didn't, you know, we'd have a very calm situation, and maybe I'd be less popular. I don't know. Maybe I'd be less popular because you know what? The fact is, people see that we fight. We're fighting for you, but it's just a really dirty, horrible business. But I said today because they would say they don't like the personality, and he's always fighting. I'm fighting to survive. You have to survive. Very few people would have survived. They would have been in the corner. They would have said, "Mommy, mommy," put their finger in the mouth, put their thumb in the mouth, and say, "Mommy, mommy, take me home. I'm out of here. Get me the hell out of here, Mom." They'd say, "Forget about the American people, Mommy. I want out of here right now." No, we can't do that, but you have to fight hard, and then you fight hard, and you hit them back, and then they say, there's chaos in the White House. They cause the chaos. We have a great group of people. We have a lot of them here tonight, great people in the White House. But it's true. I wonder if it would have been different, you know, if they didn't, because these were all, we caught them spying on our campaign. We caught them trying to take out a duly elected president of the United States. That's treason. That's treason. We caught them. And someday, maybe something's going to be done about it, too, you know, maybe. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. They can't. We don't want to do anything prior to the election. Well, what about me? They did it. They did it to me before they spied on my campaign before the election. We shouldn't do anything prior to the election. And you know who we caught? Barack Hussein Obama and Sleepy Joe Biden. They were a part of it. We ought to get these reports out. They should get them out before the election, as far as I'm concerned. They should get them out right before the election. Should have gotten them out a long time ago. We have information you wouldn't even believe it. I don't even get involved. I always said I'm going to stay uninvolved. Very hard for me to do, I'll tell you. No, it is, because, you know, I didn't have to do that. I thought it'd be the right thing. And yet they did the Mueller report, right? The phony Mueller report. 18 angry Democrats, smart. 18 angry, vicious. Many of them worked for Hillary Clinton. 18 angry Democrats. They spent $48 million, and at the end of 2.5 years, no collusion, okay? A friend of mine said, you have to be the most innocent man in the world. And they checked everything. They checked taxes. They checked. For $48 million, you check taxes, right? And by the way, we announced, you know, I prepaid millions and millions of dollars in taxes. They didn't say that. They refused to say. They say, well, prepaying isn't paying. I said, no, it's prepaying. That's even worse. Millions of dollars, many millions of dollars, and that'll all come out. Every correct. And you know, when you look at it, when you look at what's gone on, seriously, think of that. Just think about that tonight when you're with your family. I wonder if it would have been different. I wonder if it would have been a different kind of a feel. And you know what? Honestly, maybe it wouldn't have been as good. Maybe we wouldn't have these massive crowds because you see what somebody is where we're under siege, and you people get it. You're smarter than them. You're smarter than these people. You get it. And you've always gotten it. It's a beautiful thing, and I'll never forget it. I want to tell you, I'm never going to forget it. But we were under siege, and we caught them. And it's treason or whatever you want to call it. But with Sleepy Joe Biden, they don't want to write anything. We caught the whole thing. The son, where's Hunter? Where's Hunter? The son was like a human vacuum cleaner. He'd go in and follow his father. Let's go to China today, son. They fly in on Air Force Two, right? I guarantee you one thing. Mike Pence, I know his kids, they don't do that. They don't do that. They're unbelievable kids, military. But you know, let's go to China today, Dad. I'd like to follow you. It's like, walks out with $1.5 billion fees on. Oh, he must be a great investor. You know, the greatest investors don't make that deal with China. China doesn't do that. They don't give money out for other people that are less smart than them to invest. Let's give our money to somebody that's not very smart to invest, okay? That's a great idea. He walked out. It only took him 10 minutes to get it to $1.5 billion. That's millions of dollars in fees. The big one was the $10 million. You saw that one, the letter. He wants $10 million a year for introductory purposes, okay? $10 million. But it all blew up. By that time, the laptop from hell was found. The one that Schiff said was developed in Russia. It's unbelievable. And then you have Ukraine. He goes into Ukraine. His father was in charge of Ukraine, right? He was in charge of Russia, Ukraine, China, specifically. He goes into Ukraine, $183,000 a month. Do you have energy experience? It's an energy, right? Burisma. Do you have energy experience? No, I don't. I don't know anything about energy. Well, we'll pay you $183,000 a month, and we'll give you an upfront fee of approximately $3 million. Would that be satisfactory? No, think of it. No, think of it. And there are other things too. Then he's got the brother, and he's got a whole. This is a corrupt enterprise. And then they had the big man gets 10%. The big man. Who's the big? He's not a big man to me. To me, he's a very meek, fragile. He's a fragile person, and he's very agitated. I watch him today. He gets more time on Fox. I've never seen anybody on Fox so much. They have everybody on Fox. They have all enemies on Fox. I think it's crazy. But he gets a lot of time on Fox. But he's so agitated. And now he comes out with the aviator glasses, but they're a little too small. He wants to look like Tom Cruise from a long time ago. No, but he's fragile. He's not going to be there. That's not what they're counting on. They're counting on somebody else. They're counting on by far the most liberal person in the Senate, Kamala. They like her. They like Kamala. Every corrupt force in American life that betrayed you and hurt you is supporting Joe Biden. The failed establishment that started the disastrous foreign wars, they support Biden. The career politicians that offshored your industries and decimated your auto plants, and you suffered for many, many years. I'm telling you, that's why I'm here, I think, primarily. That was the first thing, trade. I said, how could they do that? They supported Biden. The open borders lobbyists that killed our fellow citizens with illegal drugs and gangs and crime that poured into our country, they support Biden. They still do. The anti-American radicals defaming our noble history, heritage, and heroes, they support Biden. They support him. They support Sleepy Joe. And you know, I signed a law that you take down any of our statues, any of our monuments, you go to jail for 10 years. It's amazing the way it seemed to have stopped, isn't it? It's really amazing. Somebody said, oh, it just stopped. No, it didn't just stop. I took an old law and reactivated it, because the new law, you go into this with this bunch with Nancy Pelosi and crying Chuck Schumer. You know what they'll do? They'll give you a medal if you rip down the statues. Antifa and the rioters, looters, Marxists, and left-wing extremists, they all support Joe Biden. This election comes down to a simple choice. Do you want to be ruled by the corrupt and selfish political class, or do you want to be governed by the American people yourselves? You're going to govern the way it was supposed to be. A vote for Biden is a vote to give control of government over to the globalists and the communists, socialists, and wealthy liberal hypocrites who want to silence, cancel, and punish you. Cancel culture, they call it. Cancel culture. No, thank you. We want to be proud of our history. Good, bad, whatever. We want our history. We want to know, and we want to learn from our history. We don't want our history canceled. We want to learn. There's things we have to learn from our history, too. If you want your children to be safe, if you want your values to be respected, if you want to be treated with honor, dignity, and respect, then I am asking you to go tomorrow and vote for a person named President Trump. Gotta win Michigan. This is a big, important place. If we win Michigan, it's over. It's over. We win the whole thing. 4 more years, and then we can finish the job we started so well. We can finish the job. You know, I got nominated. No, I say it because they don't write it. I just checked it. I thought it was 3. I got 4. 4 Nobel Peace Prizes. Can you believe it? 1 for the Middle East. 1 for Kosovo, Serbia. I mean, they want to make a trade deal. They're each fighting each other for many decades. They're fighting, killing each other. You've read it. I mean, for years, they're just automatic, killing each other for many, many decades. And we're doing these trade deals with them. Not big deals, but they want them very badly. We're doing them. And they're each doing them. And I said to the people, I said, listen, we're doing deals. They want to make the deal with us. Everybody wants to make a deal with us. I said, they're killing each other, I think, right? They're killing each other. I read about it. They're killing each other for decades. Tell them we're not making a deal unless they get together and make a peace. And we told that to them. We're not interested in doing deals unless you guys can get along and not kill each other. You know, it's human lives. We don't know where it is. You don't know where it is. Some people have never heard of the places, but they're places and they're people. They're human beings. And I said, tell them we're going to do it, but you have to make peace. And we got them together. We made peace. And they actually nominated me for a Nobel Peace Prize. I got 4 nominations and 4 unrelated things. That's crazy, right? And I told the story. You probably heard about it. The first one I went up, Middle East. You know, the Middle East is coming along. No blood in the sand, no nothing. The Middle East is great. Signed already 3 countries. We have 7, 8, 9 countries. They could all sign. I said, how did Obama do it? And they told me, I said, good, we'll do it the opposite. But not only Obama, for many, many years, they haven't been able to do it. And we're really, I'd like to finish that up, too. We need a little more time, you know. We need a little bit more time, but we have countries lined up. No money and no blood in the sand. No blood in the sand. Remember what I said 4 years ago. I am your voice, and I will make America great again. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Together, we will defeat the corrupt establishment. We will dethrone the failed political... Okay, that's Donald Trump in Michigan. And this is Robert Barnes and Pollster Rich Baris.
Flip Arizona. He's got to flip Nebraska, too. So
yeah.
That is
Nebraska too may go. It's that kind of, I don't know, man.
The only thing is they said that last time and ended up not being as close as they said.
That's true, because the shy suburban voter, if his
candidate, the congressman there was going to lose, and he didn't.
Yep.
So I mean, there is an above-average post-college voter there trending. It's just if you couldn't flip it in 2018, I don't see it flipping 2020. So I think that's my thing with that. And there's a place where you would have a lot of people wouldn't think of it, but because there's a big post-college population outside of Omaha, in that part of Nebraska too. it would be a place where you would have a lot of shy Trump voters, because if you work in that community, you're not. And I've been hearing from people in those kind of communities all across the country, saying, "Hey, thanks for this. I can't talk about this publicly. Don't," and then et cetera. So,
right, how many emails do we get around the country saying, you know what, I got to tell you, I really enjoy the work you're doing, trying to identify the shy Trumper. I am a shy Trumper. There is no way I would tell you the truth if you called me.
Okay, here's Mark Halperin on Newsmax.
Lindsay, thank you. All right, Mark. If he loses any one of those 6, can he get to 270? And if so, how difficult is it? John, mathematically, one of those 6 states could be replaced. You left Georgia off the list, but those 6 are replaceable mathematically, but they're not replaceable politically. If he loses a single one of those 6, he can't win. Now, the good news for the president is if you look at the polling in those 6 states, there's not a single one of them where he trails by more than 2 percentage points if you look at the average of the real polls that matter. And in some of them, he's ahead or he's even. So those are winnable states. He won them all last time. But if you're watching election night, you see a single one of those go to Joe Biden, I don't think the president can win.
Okay.
And is there one that you think is more vulnerable? I know you mentioned the trending. I think obviously Texas and Florida are big electorally speaking. But is there one right now that if you had to say, of those 6, I'm worried about it, which one would it be? Yeah, for the president and his supporters and from them and reporting with Republicans and Democrats, North Carolina right now seems to be the one that's the most vulnerable. The suburban vote there, the Senate race there, that's the one I would watch. That's the one I think is the one the president is going to have the hardest time winning. But as I'll say again, they're all must-wins, but they're all winnable.
Okay. Beyond North Carolina and these 6 states, or maybe it is one of them, what is the first thing that is going to be assigned to you about how the night is going to go?
Well, how the president's doing, in particularly with suburban voters, with women voters. We know he's going to lose women. We know he's almost certainly going to lose the suburbs, but he must hold his own. And then in all these states, as you know, Lindsay, what the president did last time, he needs to do on steroids this time. He needs to turn out voters in the rural areas to make up for losses in the suburbs and the urban areas. If he does that, if we start to see rural counties coming in where the president is overperforming his vote totals, not just his percentage, but his vote totals from 4 years ago, that's when we can see that the president's got a chance to win, not just those 6, but the last 2 he needs to get to 270. Mark, most of Florida, with the exception of the Panhandle and North Carolina, come in at 7 o'clock. So to Lindsay's question, I just want to follow up. Is there something that you're looking at? Because you can't necessarily look at those votes and discern outside of exit polling, suburban women or married women or what have you. Is there a county or a town or something that you're going to look at and say, we just asked, and Susie Wiles was saying Volusia County in Florida, but is there something that you're looking at saying, oh my gosh, he's going to have a good night tonight, or he's going to have a bad night based on one of those 2 states, something inside of them? Yep. Well, again, if you're not talking about the exit polls with the demographics, but you're just talking about raw returns, as you know, Sean, Florida's a state which, if it doesn't have problems, will count quickly. I'm looking at the raw vote totals. Go to any rural county in Florida, not the Panhandle, because it reports later, as you said, it closes later. But if you look at any northern county in Florida, how many votes did the president get last time? How many votes did he get this time? He's going to need more votes to win because turnout's going to be significantly higher. It's not complicated math. So can he get a handful even of more votes in rural areas around the country? Added up, that's a powerful multiplier. But that's what he's going to need to win.
Mark, you talked to both campaigns, the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. From what you're hearing from them, how are they both feeling on each side?
I'd say the Biden campaign is a lot like the Obama campaign was in 2012 against Mitt Romney. Quiet confidence, not sharing a lot about their data, but making it clear that they believe that the worst case for Joe Biden is a solid win, closing in on 300 electoral votes, clearing the 270 bar pretty easily. And as Sean and I discussed this afternoon, I'm not hearing from the Trump people very much doubt. Normally, if you're covering a campaign that's behind, as the president's campaign has been, you'll hear from some people a little bit more pessimism. Some, even the more optimistic people, will say, I think we can win. I'm hearing nothing but the kind of quiet confidence I heard in the last 96 hours from the Trump campaign 4 years ago. They believe they're going to win, that they've got multiple paths, and that
this is different from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Trump's advisors were much more pessimistic.
This is a matter of the pollsters getting it off again, as they did 4 years ago to some extent. Mark, the big prize tomorrow night is obviously the presidential race. That's what we're all looking at. But control of the Senate is at stake as well. You've been watching these races for a long time. Is there a race out there that might be the surprise upset, either on the Republican side or on the Democratic side, that people should maybe keep an eye on? Well, the Michigan Senate race, the Republican candidate, John James, has done extremely well. He's a black candidate who, if the president can get close in Michigan, could push him over the top. But that's a race which, if the Democrats don't hold their incumbent seat, it's going to make it much harder for the Republicans, to the Democrats, rather, to get the majority. Right now, Republican incumbents in Maine, in Iowa, in North Carolina look better than they did just a couple weeks ago. They may not all make it. It's probably, as everyone has said, it's probably going to come down to the 2 races in Georgia, which now appear both likely to go to runoffs, assuming Republicans can hold some of those incumbents and perhaps pick up that seat in Michigan.
Yeah. We just have a couple seconds left, Mark, but do you think that we're going to have an answer by tomorrow night, or is this going to go multiple days on?
Lindsay, I'll end where we began, the significant 6. If the president can win all the significant 6 or have them effectively be ties by tomorrow night, Pennsylvania will go into overtime, Arizona could go into overtime. So if he wins all the significant 6 or has them to be a tie, I think we'll go at least a couple more days. If he loses a single one, I think we can start to focus on the Senate races. All right. Well, Mark Halperin, thank you for joining us tonight. You and I will be sitting at the decision desk tomorrow night, starting at 7 o'clock after.
Okay, that's Newsmax there. Let's go back to here. Let's go to Fox, get a report from Fox, their pundits. So these are mainstream Democrats, Republicans, everyone.
All right, let's bring in a panel of political journalists tonight from the battleground states, the key ones. Steve Conturo, political editor of the Tampa Bay Times. Scott Bowers, Associated Press State House reporter based in Madison, Wisconsin. Candy Woodall is a reporter for USA Today Network, Pennsylvania Capitol Bureau. And Travis Fain is a political and State House reporter, WRAL-TV in Raleigh, North Carolina. I used to work there. Good to see all of you. Thanks for being here. Candy, I want to start with you because there's a lot of focus. I mean, a lot of focus on Pennsylvania. If you look at the Real Clear Politics average of polls, it's getting narrow. It's Biden by 2.9. If you look back to 2016, this was Clinton by 1.9 heading into Election Day. What is it like on the ground there?
It's a very close race, and that's evident pretty much anywhere you go. I'm actually watching the margins in the red counties right now, which might seem different than what you usually hear. But Democrats for decades were able to win Pennsylvania by winning Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and the Philadelphia suburbs alone. President Trump turned that campaign strategy on its head in 2016 when he drove the margins so high in the red counties that Democrats couldn't make up the difference.
So, Candy, we only know the ballots out that were requested, right? It's like 2.4 million. We don't have a sense of either party breakdown or what came back in.
Sure. So about 3 million ballots have been requested at this point, and about 2 million have been returned. So we're expecting, a large turnout of Republican voters at the polls tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, let's head down to Florida, your neck of the woods. Again, another tight race. The RCP average has Biden plus 1.7. Again, Florida. It's always Florida. What are you seeing?
Yeah, like we saw in Pennsylvania, very close race here as well. We've already had 9 million people vote, which is breaking every early voting record that we've seen. And really the question is how many people now turn out tomorrow? Is it just a lot of people have shifted to voting early, sending in mail-in ballots? Or is there going to be a high turnout tomorrow as well, where we get to 75, maybe 80% turnout in some of these very large counties?
Steve, Politico writes this about Florida strategies. There's a higher degree of worry among Democratic insiders than Republicans because the GOP has won more top-of-the-ticket races in Florida, despite having fewer registered voters overall and despite a spate of pre-election day polls that show Biden with a narrow lead. You buy that?
Yeah, Democrats haven't done very well in statewide races that don't include President Obama on the ticket, which is why I think you've seen President Obama spend so much time in Florida this past week. He was in Miami today. He was in the Orlando area earlier. And there's just a lot of emphasis on, bringing that Biden-Obama connection back, trying to convince that 2012 coalition of voters to come back home and vote for Joe Biden this election. Okay, Scott, let's head on over to the Badger State here, Wisconsin. A little bit more heading in of a spread for Joe Biden, 6.6 in the average of polls. But the president spent some time there on the ground in Wisconsin. What are you seeing?
Yeah, the president is on his way here right now to Wisconsin for one of his last stops of the campaign. We have 1.9 million votes in already, about 9 times more mail balloting than we did in 2016. The president won Wisconsin by fewer than 23,000 votes. Democrats and Republicans, frankly, both feel like at this point it looks like Biden is ahead here. But the president has made multiple stops in the past week. Biden was here on Friday. Definitely a state that no one is taking for granted at this point.
Yeah, and is there a sense that the get out the vote operation on the ground is different between the two parties and that's making a difference?
Republicans feel really confident about their get out the vote operation here. Democrats also feel like their early vote operation was highly successful. The numbers coming in, a lot of huge numbers from Democratic counties. We don't know what parties people return their ballots are from, but we do know that the Democratic counties had a huge early vote turnout. So as in these other states, a lot of it is going to depend on who shows up tomorrow at the polls. Will there be enough Republicans who show up on Election Day to counter what a lot of people think is a very heavy Democratic early turnout?
Yeah, okay. Travis, you're up here in North Carolina. Again, this has Trump 0.5 and the average of Real Clear Politics 0.5%. And obviously you also have a very tight Senate race down there. What are you seeing on the ground?
It's extremely tight, kind of the tightest of the tight that we've talked about right here. And, that 0.5 for Trump and the Real Clear Politics average, that was 0.7 for Biden at the end of last week. So, this is probably going to come down to the wire in the presidential race. The Senate race is not quite as close. It's close, but the average has been, I think, about 2% for Cal Cunningham, the Democrat, facing Senator Tom Tillis here. And the numbers really have not moved much against Cunningham, even though an affair was exposed that he had. That was a little bit surprising, but that one, the numbers just have not moved a ton in that one.
So when you look at that early vote, you got mail-in at 937,000, in-person 3.6 million. Those are huge numbers. But what does that tell you where it's coming from, and can you kind of divine who's benefiting from that?
Cautious about trying to divine things, especially, since people will know if I was wrong or not by tomorrow night. But I think we're still going to have pretty good turnout tomorrow. If we get 1 million voters tomorrow, I won't be surprised, and that'll put us, up, kind of getting close to record turnout territory. And we're just going to have to see. Yeah, I love saying that because we will see tomorrow, finally. Scott and Steve, Candy and Travis, we really appreciate your time, the local perspective. Thanks a lot. When we come back, our other panel.
It shows you the Medicare plans. There's so much time. It makes it really easy and seamless. Items on my credit.
You're going to start paying your fair share. You're going to start stepping up.
Well, there it is. 2 candidates' final pitches. Let's bring in our panel. Josh Kraushaar is politics editor for the National Journal. Pollster Kirsten Soltis Anderson and Chris Direwalt is politics editor here at Fox News. I have the election nerds with me. Is that what you said, Chris? All right, Kristen, what are you looking for when we get to tomorrow? It's finally Election Day tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to look to see what types of counties are seeing the biggest surges in turnout. We know that in states like Texas and Georgia, places that we didn't think of as swing states not too many election cycles ago, are suddenly in question, in part because so many people have decided they want to participate this year. And even though this has been in some ways an incredibly stable presidential election, where President Trump's job approval has stayed pretty flat all year, where the national polls have stayed pretty flat for the last couple of months, this huge surge in turnout and where it's coming from is adding a level of uncertainty into this process. So I want to see where these votes are coming from.
Josh, we've noticed the Biden campaign seems to be zeroing in on Pennsylvania. 2 more stops today from the former vice president. This is the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette endorsed President Trump. The newspaper has not supported a Republican for president since 1972, but it goes on to say, we believe Mr. Trump, for all his faults, is the better choice for this year. Your thoughts about Pennsylvania, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of time spent counting votes in Pennsylvania. So if it's a close race, we could be spending days in Pennsylvania just like we did in Florida in 2000. But I'm looking closely at the Sun Belt, the southern states, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. And if Democrats have a good night, and we'll know early on, we'll be counting a lot of those southern states quicker than we do those Midwestern states. If Biden wins any one of those Sun Belt states, it's a very, very good sign for Democrats across the board, especially Joe Biden. If he can, especially those seniors in Florida, that's a demographic I'm looking very closely at. If Joe Biden does well in Florida, makes inroads with seniors in Florida, that's a very encouraging sign for the Democrats.
Chris, you're on our decision desk. We've been waiting for this day to come. It's now, 5 hours and something away. What is it like to finally get numbers, and what are you looking for?
Well, here's our outlook. We have been preparing for this moment since 2016, when we left the exit polling consortium that frustrated and disappointed everybody at every election night for so many years, and we made our own better mousetrap, the Fox News voter analysis. That gives us more data, more information than anybody else. It puts us in the catbird seat. Now, we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, and we didn't know that early and absentee voting was going to go up 50% this year, but boy, are we happy that we did it. So the way we feel is like we've tried it out in 2018, we've tested it out, we have this great thing, and we're just excited to get to turn it on, and we're like the Death Star. We're excited to have a fully operational space station.
But it's a benevolent Death Star.
We'll see. We'll see how you do.
Chris, early in the night, we will get, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. It is so close in those states, but we should have a picture from some of those key places inside those states, as you were talking about.
That's right. And I'm going to be looking at counties like Sumter County in Florida, for instance. It's where the Villages is. As Josh was mentioning earlier, the senior vote is so important to both of these coalitions, for Republicans to sustain their leads and for Democrats to make big inroads. I'll also be looking at a county like Seminole County, which is just north. It's like the North Orlando suburbs. It's the type of place that Republicans typically do fairly well in, but Democrats have been trying to make inroads there. But in those exit polls, and rather Fox News' voter analysis, the question I'm going to be looking at is, what are people's top issue? There tends to be this interesting gap between voters who say they approve of Trump on the economy, but they're not quite sure they're going to vote for him. If a lot of voters are saying the economy is my number one issue, that's a good sign for Trump early in the night.
I found it interesting talking to those reporters in the different battleground states, Josh, and talking to the guy from Travis from North Carolina, suggesting maybe the Senate race is a little bit further apart, at least in his view, than the presidential race. How much do you think President Trump lifts some of those Senate races, the GOP, because that's obviously going to be a big part of the night as well?
Yeah, these Senate races are all nationalized. They're all about President Trump. And if you don't like President Trump, it's hard. I mean, a lot of the Republicans thought that Tom Tillis had a really good chance to emerge in the lead after the sex scandal for his Democratic opponent. But what a lot of Republicans are seeing is that everything is so nationalized that people are just casting straight ticket ballots more and more. So while there could be a surprise in North Carolina, Tom Tillis, their campaign has hope that they can break out at the very end. But straight party tickets are so much more common these days. So it's really hard to see sort of senators running ahead of the Trump ticket. In fact, Republican senators need Trump more than ever, even no matter what his job approval rating ends up being.
When will we know, Chris? When will we know some picture tomorrow?
Well, we got to think about it this way. If it's a big Biden win, it'll be pretty clear pretty early, right? If he's met or exceeded his polls, you'd expect to see stuff shape up pretty soon. And we're talking about Florida and the Carolinas. If it's close, we could be talking about days. If this comes down to Pennsylvania, which it very well may be the end of the week before we really know.
Harrisburg is really nice this time of year.
It's lovely.
All right. Thank you all. When we come back, a preview of tomorrow night. Keep it here.
Okay, so this is some chilling video from Barcelona. So a juxtaposition of the man on the piano playing Eternal Flame by the Bangles and the scene unfolding behind them. It's quite extraordinary. So check this out. This is what's going on in Barcelona last night. Quite a juxtaposition. Here's cross-cut.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
When he said today, America first, it was not just the racial, the Hitlerian background to it.
It was an America First committee. They were infiltrated by the Nazis. Many of them were anti-Semitic, part of why they weren't alarmed by Hitler's rise in Germany.
Outside of the Civil War, World War II, and including 9/11, this may be the most cataclysmic event the country's ever seen.
He's just disgusting to look at. He's obese. He's one of the repulsive, physically looking human beings I've ever seen.
Absolutely no morals, who's a bully, who acts like a bigot and a racist, and is a sexist and a sexual harasser.
The case for impeachment has never been stronger. The evidence never so riveting.
Are you suggesting that President Trump should face impeachment?
Another member of Congress wants him impeached.
There's growing talk, at least, about impeachment.
What is your case for impeachment? The first day of public testimony in the impeachment inquiry, opening with a bombshell.
We got the bombshell.
A bombshell.
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 One bombshell after another.
Bombshell after bombshell.
We're bracing for potentially an explosive opening statement.
Explosive leak.
Explosive testimony.
Explosive.
Truly explosive.
The most explosive thing.
This is a slow motion explosion.
How explosive? Very explosive.
And I think it will be explosive.
Wow.
Donald Trump feels the walls closing in.
Really kind of the walls closing in on him.
Walls closing in on him. Walls closing in on him.
There is a non-trivial chance that if Donald Trump loses the election, he ends up living out the rest of his days in prison.
But here's the question. Would you like to see President Trump in prison?
Do you want to see the president in prison?
Do you think Trump could end up going to jail?
He could actually face jail time.
Donald Trump could end up in jail.
In prison.
If he ends up in jail, so be it.
You are pathetic.
From a journalism point of view, Donald Trump is a brain-eating disease.
How stupid can you be?
This president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did.
His ignorance could pose a profound danger to every single person in this country and literally every inhabitant of the planet Earth.
No, we won't call them fascist comments. Fascism, fascist.
Xenophobic, racist, demagogic, sexist, autocratic. Donald Trump is a fascist.
Someone like a fascist or a tyrant or an autocrat.
Fascists.
Hitler.
Adolf Hitler.
Hitler. He could well be just an empty man, an empty human being with no soul.
Donald Trump blows Vladimir Putin like there are illegal immigrants hiding in Putin's and he's got to suck them all out.
In fact, the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's holster.
You, Donald Trump, are a horrible, horrible human being. Horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty representative of the news coverage that the president has received. Here's Robert Barnes and Rich Baris on the pre-election poll.
I don't care if it's on the phone. You tell me it's anonymous. I don't care if it's, in our closet. I'm not telling you because, you may leak to a coworker and I'll get fired. I'll get abused. How many of these emails do we get a week? I don't even know, Robert. I mean, it's like crazy, so I know they're real. And then, by the way, you see Robert from Trafalgar, he retweeted somebody who took a screenshot of his thing. He was taking a poll and he was like, haha, I lied. And there's like, I stop doing that because I can see clear as day when someone's lying. The difference is, again, I'm not going to change it. I'm not because in my experience, it's just like it gets subjective then. It's when does it end? Maybe this one's lying too. You just can't do it. Maybe others want to do it fine, but I'm not.
Yeah, again, it's just a different. As long as I think people are transparent about it, I think that serves the purpose. So I can't be moving it like Trafalgar and Basham do because their purpose is to forecast the election. Your purpose is just to measure opinion. But as long if people know, hey, by the way, it says Biden up.
So Daniel Dale, he's a fact checker for CNN. He says the president is ranting again about Twitter's trending topics, saying the list includes too much boring stuff. He says, I know what trending is better than anybody in the world. I've been trending my whole life. From the day I was born, I've been trending. That's pretty funny because Twitter's trending has been censored heavily. It is really boring. And if there's a political slant, 98% of the time it's left wing. And Mickey Kaus responds, I admire that Trump feels the need to entertain the crowd with obsessive riffs is much better than Drury on messaging. Not saying it is effective politics, but he's treating the crowd as equals. If a topic bores him, he figures it will bore them. So I'd actually like to hear the Trump here riffing on Twitter's trending topics.
We will drain the Washington swamp, and we will save the American dream for your children, for your grandchildren. This election is also a choice between a deadly Biden lockdown or a safe vaccine. The vaccine is coming along great. Couple of weeks. It's going to be out soon. That ends the pandemic. And it will end anyway. They hate it when I say we're rounding the corner. It's going to end anyway, but the vaccine will make it go a lot quicker. And what we've done with therapeutics is incredible. Excuse me, here I am. But I like to say, no. I like to say it had no impact on me. I didn't really need it. They just happened to give it to me because I'm a perfect physical specimen that's very young. I'm very young and in perfect physical shape. No, but it's amazing what we've been able to do is incredible, really incredible. We will mass distribute the vaccine in just a few weeks, and it will quickly eradicate this virus. We're going to start off very much with, we've learned about it with our senior citizens, especially if they have a condition, a heart condition, they have some problem, any kind of a problem. Boy, it's vicious. That's the ones it really goes after. But we're going to protect our great senior citizens first, and then it'll go very quickly throughout for anybody that wants it. It won't be enforced. It's not going to be enforced. For people that want it, and we'll get it done, and it'll all take place. And very quickly. And by the way, nobody else would have been able to do what we did. Nobody else would have been able to do what we did. Joe Biden, he handled the swine flu as one of the great catastrophes. It was a mess. His own chief of staff said we had no idea what the hell we were doing. I don't know why this guy admitted that. I can't figure out why he admitted it. Probably before Joe thought he could ever run. Joe thought his career was over because he wasn't thinking straight. Then he ran, and Elizabeth Warren said, I want to stay until the end and take out Bernie. She took out Bernie, and we're running against Joe instead of Bernie. And Bernie's going to run again, though, in another 4 years. He's going to run again. One thing about that guy, he never gives up, does he? But he's a hell of a loser. He loses the first time, and he goes back. He's like, no hard feelings. He loses the second time horribly. The way the Democrats took advantage of Bernie Sanders and everybody that he represents, but they're looking to take over Joe. They signed, they agreed to the manifesto, I call it. You have to see what's in that one. Joe Biden is promising to delay the vaccine and turn America into a prison state. That's what he wants. Locking you in your home while letting the far left rioters, so the rioters and the looters, the anarchists, Antifa, they can go knock the hell out of you, roam your streets, set your stores on fire. No problem. That's called protesting. We must protect our protesters, but you're not allowed to go to church. You're not allowed to have dinner, right? The only one allowed to have dinner in this state is the husband of your governor. He's the only one that's got special privileges. That was not a good day when he got caught boating or whatever the hell we did. Who are you? I'm the husband of the governor. The police didn't go for that one too well, did they? Huh? No, that wasn't a great day. No, you got to open up your state, governor. Open it up, governor. Let the kids go back to school. Let the kids go back to school. It's like Barron Trump, right? They said, First Lady had it, I had it. They said, sir, you tested positive. First Lady didn't come to see us a little while later. They said, sir, Barron, White House doctor, great doctor, Sean. Sir, Barron just tested positive. I said, tested positive for what? For corona. It sounds like, I like the China virus. Or I like the plague from China, but a lot of people use it like, it sounds like an island in Italy. I said, it's not corona, but just tested positive for corona. I said, well, I don't like that. That's not good. Barron, he's strong. He's very tall. He's only 14 years old. He's very tall. I can tell. Hi, Barron. And he's a good boy, but he just tested positive. And I said, wow. Then about 12 minutes later, I see the doctor. Doctor, how's Barron? No, it's okay. He's fine now. It took him about 12 seconds to get rid of it. Because they're young and they have a strong immune system. No, he got better so fast. And you know what I say? Let the kids go to school.
Okay, Alex Berenson tweets, says clients with big data proprietary programs in both the USA and London report the following results, that Trump will have a very close win in the Electoral College, that Trump will win Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. States too close to call: Michigan, New Mexico, Nevada, New Hampshire. Senate, that GOP will lose Arizona, Colorado, and Maine, but retain a 51 to 49 majority. That's Alex Berenson.
Two here, but there's as much as 3% of the vote that may be shy Trump vote based on the internal questions and demographics of that group. And so, you make your assessment accordingly.
I really enjoyed conversations with plurality vote. I always love that word. They were like, they contacted me and they were just like, hey, listen, we saw your Pennsylvania poll, because now we know. It's there. It's there. And by the way, they're leaning to Trump. They're leaning to him. People don't understand what that means. Biden has maxed out. He has no more votes to get in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, even Minnesota, it looks like. Arizona, he did tick up a little, but his leaners leaned first. And then he was done, because we did it over a 3-week period. So his voters were like undecided, maybe 4 days, 5 days later. All right, I'm leaning, I'm going with Biden. And then what was left on the table was so overwhelmingly Trump that the totality of the undecided vote was still 3-1. So, in some states, most of them are like 2-1, but some have been 3-1.
Okay, let's get some analysis here from Carl Rowe from a few
There are
minutes
some states
ago.
they feel good about, some states they're not so sure about tonight.
Yeah, I think they're, first of all, buoyed by the enthusiasm of the crowds that he's drawing. They have a confidence in their ground game. I've been talking to a few of the people involved in it, and they have good reason to be comfortable or confident about their ground game. But that only matters if the race in that state is close. A good ground game can buy you a 1 or a 2 point or maybe 2.5 points, but it can't buy you 5. And the utility of having a ground game is there may be a bunch of states that are going to be decided by very slim margins. I think this race tomorrow, at least what I get from the Trump people, is they're hoping this race tomorrow has some surprises. Always have them, but they're hoping for surprises in some places that the Democrats may be a little bit too overconfident about.
And what do you think, Carl? Just staying with you for a moment before I go back to Donna. What's your assessment of these close states when you look at North Carolina, you look at Georgia, look at Arizona? What are you seeing out there tonight?
Well, we saw what could be happening when we got at 7:30 p.m. on Friday night, the Seltzer poll, the Iowa poll. There's a bipartisan agreement that it's a very good poll. It's made some very tough calls that have been proven right. And what it showed is that over the month of October, that Trump made a dramatic move and is now in front by, I think it's 7 points. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of reason for them to be excited about things like that. Whether it's going to be enough, I don't know. And look, this election has been stranger than any one in our lifetime because it was conducted during a moment of pandemic with a unique person occupying the Oval Office and a highly surprised candidate taking the Democratic nomination. Loses Iowa, loses New Hampshire, loses Nevada, wins in South Carolina, and bam, it's over. I mean, this race has been so unpredictable and conducted in such an unusual way, and with two very different strategies. The incumbent saying, I'm going to be out there every day on the stage, and his challenger saying, it's better for me to hang out in my basement and minimize my public exposure for as long as possible. And how it's going to turn out, anybody's guess.
So true. I mean, you go back to New Hampshire, Donna, when Joe Biden, I remember, looking at
Broward, Fort Lauderdale, Pasco, Sumter, they will that we have over 95 million.
Is looking at the turnout, and I asked this yesterday too, and Chris Direwalt's reaction was that he just thinks there's a tremendous amount of turnout still to come in the coming tomorrow. But what if there isn't? What if everybody changed the way that they vote? And they, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of people coming out tomorrow, but what if the numbers aren't as expected? Well,
I think they will be, and I'll tell you why. People tend to vote in the way that they want to vote and routinely vote. So big changes in how they vote, what that's illustrative of is enthusiasm. Everybody wants to vote in this election. And given a choice between mail-in ballot or on Election Day or early at an early voting location, they're going to find a way to vote. So I don't think it's just going to be people who said, I'm comfortable mailing in a ballot who turned out at higher numbers, or people who said, I want to vote early and turned out at higher numbers. I think it's going to be people who said, by God, I like voting on Election Day. We're going to see a big turnout among them. We've been in a secular period since 1996 where every presidential election since then, with the exception of one, has shown an increase in the percentage of the voting age population that's turning out. I think we're going to set a record tomorrow. Martha, I'd like to say something quickly about African American and Hispanic turnout. I think I've talked to some Democrats and some reporters who are covering Georgia and covering Florida, and I detect that there is some concern among Democrats. In Miami, they're on the record. Democrats are saying we're worried both about the percentage that Trump is going to get among Latinos, particularly Cuban and Venezuelan Americans, who are wired up because they see a big difference on these men when it comes to the policies regarding their former home countries, and also concerned about the lack of enthusiasm among African American voters. This shows up particularly in Georgia, where if you want to win as a Democrat, you got to have about 31 to 32% of the early vote be African American. It's about 28% now. Now, sure, there's a big, huge turnout, but the percentage that a Democrat would need to win Georgia is below what historically has been thought to be the norm.
Yeah, that was the key thing that I noticed, and I'm not a political professional, but what I noticed on Election Day in 2016 that gave me considerable hope for Donald Trump the morning of that Election Day was that quite low black turnout in key swing states. And so that same pattern seems to be repeating itself this year.
Look at some of those Georgia numbers this afternoon, and they do look like they're lower, as Carl aptly points out. I had a conversation, Donna, before I let you go, with Congressman Clyburn last night. He was very...
They may have dropped them in the mail.
Okay. Let's go back here to Bonds and
Baris. Minnesota was 3-1. So, I mean, and then with Pennsylvania leaning, so they called, they contacted me and they were like, can you talk a little bit about the uncertainties that you see in the poll? Because we built this model. When this is what goes in it. It's really cool. If you guys haven't checked it out, just check it out. And they're outliers because they had been showing that Iowa was never going to go to Biden. It was like some 90% chance it's going to Trump. Iowa, Ohio, very strong for Trump. And they have other metrics that they put into it, outperform polling averages, and they're like, there is no doubt. Pennsylvania leans Trump. It leans Trump and all these metrics. And can you tell us what could possibly throw off some of these polls? And then we talked about it. And then Wisconsin as well. I'm like, look, even forget about the partisan lean. Forget about it. Because partisanship is partisanship, and they do their best to try to infer. Demographics. Period. It is more male. It is more working class. It is more rural. It's just not the typical, kind of thing. Hang on one second. Can you tell her I am on the phone? I am busy. I'm on the podcast. That's 5 calls in a row. If I miss something, my bad. But for the love of God, if I don't call you back, I don't call you back. Right?
Well, I always have my phone on silent, but of course I get into trouble for that. But depends on the industry.
What other Senate races are we missing, Robert?
I'm going to go through. Yeah. So here's all the different PredictIt markets that I would.
And Michael Tracy has a good tweet here. I was at the 2016 Election Eve event in North Carolina that Lady Gaga did with Hillary. Not sure why the next Democratic nominee would do the exact same thing again, if only out of superstitious fear of being jinxed.
So for and I'll get into the Senate as part of this, and the House as part of this. So for the presidential race, you can bet on different, Trump to win by 1, by 2, by 3, by 4. And what is I recommend you bet on all of them within certain ranges. And you'll be betting like $8 to win $92. And what is you aggregate all of those, he's only going to win in one of those categories. But because of the payoff, it ends up being like a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 bet. So I have Arizona, Trump by 1 to 4. Pennsylvania, Trump by any, just a win, period, by any margin, by all the margins that are listed there. Iowa to win by 6 or more. Texas to win by 4 or more. North Carolina to win by 4 or more. Georgia,
that's a big bet, really? That's a big bet.
Here's why on North Carolina. 3 things. 1, the voter rate. He almost won by 4 in 2016. Number 1. Number 2, the voter registration date has been massively moving towards Republicans. And 3, and there's a history of that pretty well tracking and forecasting the election as a voter registration model done by, I think, the Real American was who did it. But and then early vote. The African-American vote share will be the lowest vote share of the early vote it has ever been in North.
Right. So low African turnout, then that's not good news for the Dems. Matt Walsh tweets, trying to remember if any business owners anywhere in the country had to board up their windows in 2008 or 2012 for fear that Republicans would be upset about an Obama victory. Oh, wait, I remember. No, they did not. Here is how we conservatives handled the Obama elections. We were very disheartened for the country and for our candidates who lost. But we went back to work. We served God. We invested. We raised our kids. We paid our bills. We paid our higher taxes. And we pursued our goals.
North Carolina. And the millennial vote down too, not having colleges as active as they should have has hurt them in North Carolina. So between the youth vote decline, the African-American vote decline, the voter registration trends, plus pre-existing data in North Carolina, plus how the demographics play out for Trump in North Carolina, I have him winning by more than 4. In Georgia, Trump to win by 4 or more. Florida to win by any margin between 0 and 6. Because all of them are good value. That all of these bets, if you took on PredictIt, are between 2-to-1 to 4-to-1. Ohio for him to win by more than 3.5. To bet against 538, you can now there's a market now in PredictIt.
Now you're probably wondering, what are Candace Owens' thoughts on this election?
And so they just are positioned. They thought that Kamala Harris would perform better amongst Black Americans when they first introduced her when she was running for president of the United States, and she failed miserably. She fell flat on her face. And so they just are positioning her just behind Joe Biden. She's already slipped a few times, you'll recall. She said under a Harris administration, totally bizarre stuff. Could you imagine if it's just not normal to slip about? And not only that, but Joe Biden has even been saying it on stage. So I think they're really setting the stage for Kamala Harris to take over because they know that they can't have her win through the traditional methods because, quite frankly, she's just really unlikable.
Oh, she's awful.
Okay, that's a little something there from Candace Owens. Okay, let's...
They thought that Kamala Harris would perform better amongst Black Americans when they first introduced her.
Stop. Okay. Let's get a little bit more from Trafalgar guy, Robert Cahaly.
Robert, thanks for being here tonight. Good to have you with us. So, some would listen to that and say it's anticipatory to say that there's going to be cheating when we haven't seen it happen yet. Why are you so confident of that?
Well, first of all, Pennsylvania has a long history of this, especially in the Philadelphia area. If anybody has any questions about that, they can check out my Twitter tonight. I'll list about 4 or 5 major newspaper articles that cover this. But more importantly is the Supreme Court ruling for Pennsylvania in the state. I mean, this is how this is institutionalized. I mean, think about this. They have literally ruled that they'll accept ballots up to 7 days with unclear or no postmarks. I mean, that is like opening the doors of the bank, turning off the cameras, leaving the vault open and saying, okay, well, nobody should steal. Come on.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's absolutely insane.
So they've also said that you don't have to match the signatures, right? So they're not going to look to see if the signature on it matches a prior signature of that voter. I really don't know how you can throw out those 2 things and say that you are running a sound election. It seems beyond understanding that you could get away with that.
Yeah, and that's my whole point. It's like, even if you want to debate what's happened in Philly or what hadn't happened in Philly, I mean, they have literally set the stage to where this is not going to be difficult to do. And that's why I say that he's got to win it by that kind of a margin, because that is a very hard thing to overcome, because come the day after the election, they know how many votes they have to get. I mean, if you can put ballots in the box for another 4 days.
Well, that's why that's why everybody's got to watch this process very closely in a legal way. To have both sides, making sure that they're looking at everything and that all of this is on the up and up, because it could very well come down to Pennsylvania. Tell me before I let you go, you say that President Trump's going to win Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Arizona. What do you see happening in the Rust Belt states and in Nevada at this point? Have you looked at your latest numbers?
We show him winning Michigan. We show we're going to have some more polls in Nevada, Wisconsin, and Minnesota tomorrow.
What about Wisconsin?
No? We're going to have another poll in Wisconsin tomorrow.
All right. We'll look forward to it, Robert. Thank you very much. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, epic amounts of cheating traditionally in Pennsylvania.
Hey there, folks. Coming up in our next segment for the rest of the hour, Kevin Votestradamus. And you can get my 3 Donald the Caveman McCullough. Why don't I talk to another political prognosticator who has been at least as accurate as the brilliant Kevin? I have now Robert Cahaly with the Trafalgar Group. Robert, thanks for joining us. What are you thinking about what's going to take place tomorrow?
I think Trump's going to win. I think he's going to get the requisite 270 plus electoral votes, and he's going to win the election.
Okay, I think we're done. No, seriously, though, that's kind of big news because the last time, if you don't mind my asking you to toot your horn a little bit, tell us, in 2016 and 2018, you and the Trafalgar Group seemed to nail it. And the reason, of course, that's substantive because everyone else did whatever the opposite of nailing it is. It seemed not to even be close, which kind of made me wonder why we do any polling at all if they can be that far off. But what is it that you guys saw in 2016 that made you so accurate?
Well, we noticed that when we did the polls in the primary, we noticed that everything we did digital was more accurate than our live calls. And so we kind of went and did a little homework on that, trying to figure out what that was.
What does that mean, digital? Are you talking about cell phones? Are you talking about internet questionnaires?
Message, emails, auto calls, everything. The digital components were more accurate. And so we also noticed a lot of new people because, I work primarily, I live and work in Georgia and South Carolina. And so I study those primary results very carefully, and I know those electorates very well. And so I looked at it, and we realized there's a lot of people who were voting who hadn't voted recently. And so I said, well, those two things, kind of piqued my interest. So we spent the summer first building a model of the type of people we then described as Trump surge voters. Kind of low propensity voters who, for whatever reason, had come out of the woodwork to vote for Trump, even though they've been dormant for a very long time. The other thing was when we noticed that the digital components were doing better than the live calls, I had a feeling that what's called the social desirability bias was at play. And what that is when a live caller especially, but in any poll, the person is hesitant to make it clear who they're for fear of being judged for who they're for. So they tend to, fib a little bit and say they're voting for someone else. They look best in the eyes of the person who's asking the question. And having grown up in South Carolina, was in the same media market as a lot of North Carolina. So I remember this when they would always say that if Jesse Helms was only losing by 5, he was going to win by 2. And so I had a very good experience with this social desirability bias from a very young age, and grew up working with some different guys. One of them was Rod Shealy. He was a pollster that was a contemporary of Lee Atwater, and he always talked about how you ask a question that's the impolite answer that you can get people to say something without having to take the heat for saying something.
Okay, so to put it in plain English, somebody like Jesse Helms, people would know he was, younger people won't remember this, but he was divisive or whatever you want to call it. He was one of those people kind of like Trump that a lot of people just hated his guts. A lot of people on the left, I should say. And so, yes, it affected polls going way back then. But how is it that pollsters besides you and just a handful of others don't understand this? Are they working for the Democratic Party and they want to puff up their numbers, or are they simply just bad pollsters?
Well, I think it's a combination. One, they haven't changed with the times. They are still operating on this flawed model, believing that live calls are sacrosanct and that you have the live callers everything, and that you have to ask these long questionnaires. And we find that live calls with long questionnaires are the most likely to be wrong. Average people don't have time to answer 20 questions on a Tuesday night when they're washing the dishes. Now, if they get a quick questionnaire like ours, under 3 minutes, 6 or 7 questions, yeah, they'll do that. We've also found that the more anonymous someone feels, the more honest they tend to be. So a live call is probably the worst way to poll them. We found that text messages, emails have a much higher honesty rate. And even then, you can't completely eliminate social desirability bias because, as even our friend on the left, Michael Moore, said, Republicans are very suspect of who's asking the question of being on some list. So that Republicans aren't participating.
Well, that's an amazing statement, isn't it? That in the United States of America, we would be suspect. We would be worried about the left not sharing our most basic values about privacy and the sanctity of voting, and that we may get on a bad list. That says a lot. Well, given your accuracy, then, what are you predicting that the president will win, or by what margin are you willing to say you think he'll win?
I think at minimum he'll be on the above. I'd say the high 270s. I think that his minimum path is going to be Florida. the real battleground states, winning Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, and then picking up one of Michigan or Pennsylvania. I think he could win Pennsylvania by 1 or 2 points, but not get it. I believe there's with the Supreme Court decision, which I consider institutional voter fraud, allowing ballots without postmark to be counted. They can be mailed after Election Day. I think he has to win Pennsylvania by 4 or 5% to actually win Pennsylvania.
Okay, see, now that, again, we are normalizing corruption. Talk about highly illegal. You're saying that you're expecting Pennsylvania to behave, or election officials in Pennsylvania to commit crimes, to steal a close victory from Trump. You're expecting that.
Not that they would commit the crime. I would say allowing no postmark on ballots to be counted would be the same as the police turning off the cameras and letting you walk into a bank with no repercussions with the drawers open. They didn't commit the crime, but they certainly enabled it.
Well, all right. So you're not thinking there's going to be some kind of a Trump landslide. You think it'll be a slim victory? I
do. I think that I expect that path to probably go through Michigan or a combination of Nevada, Wisconsin, or Minnesota. But I do think he'll at least be in the high 270s.
That's slim. That's slim. And I worry if it's slim just because I think that the violent left will act out and try to somehow get it back through intimidation. What do you see the House and Senate doing?
I would be honest, we've done very little study on the House. But as far as the Senate races, if what we think is going to happen with Trump, I predict that the Republicans could do as well as picking up a seat and as badly as losing 1 or 2 seats, but not probably losing the majority.
In the Senate. Wow, that's interesting. I'm just hearing so many different things. The voter enthusiasm on the Trump side it would be dramatic even if the very opposite weren't happening on the Biden side. In other words, under any normal circumstances, the enthusiasm we're seeing, parades, whatever you call it for Trump, it's historic. But Biden's lack of enthusiasm is also historic. In fact, it's shocking. And if the media were covering it, I think he would be doing far less well than he is or will do.
It's kind of like somebody giving you this awesome bag of candy that says 0 calories, 0 fat. It tastes great. It's absolutely wonderful. And you start to wonder, is the only reason I think this stuff isn't fattening is because of the label? I mean, everything else tells us this election is not a Biden big win, except for the polls. So maybe we should question the label.
Well, listen, I'm so grateful for your time. Robert Cahaly with the Trafalgar Group. You got it very right last time. I hope you got it right this time. Thanks for your time, sir.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be on the show.
Okay, so Nate Silver has tweeted that if Trump wins all 3 needle states, the election is 50-50. And the needle states are Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. So if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he will be the favorite to win. But if Trump wins Florida, Georgia, North Carolina on their own, then Nate Silver puts the election at 50-50. Okay, here are Robert Barnes, Rich Baris.
Where you can bet against whatever the 538 national polling average is.
Joke.
And so the national polling average is probably going to finish around Trump losing by 8 or more.
Yeah.
So my view is to bet that market is off by 6 or more. You can bet all the way up, and you get very good odds on that. So that's the presidential elections, plus all the states that I previously mentioned, Nevada, but adding Nevada, New Hampshire, and Minnesota is good bets, plus every state that Trump won in 2016. The only state on the Democratic side, I would bet on every Democratic state that they won other than those states, and I would not trust Colorado. I think Colorado was still safely Democrat, but not at the margin that's being talked about. On the Senate, here's the Senate bets that I have. Republicans to win Alaska, Texas, South Carolina, Kansas, Georgia, not the Georgia special election. I would wait on that, but
that's a hold. Yeah.
But the regular Georgia election, I believe Purdue will hold.
It looks like Doug Collins took the lead though over there on Kelly Loeffler at the last minute.
And on Quillette, an essay, the experience of being disillusioned with politics was exactly the same as realizing that a hooker doesn't love you.
It does.
I think that would be better, frankly, for the Republicans.
Me too.
But the reason there's a risk there with the Georgia special, if there's a runoff and Trump wins, then that seat may flip with unusual turnout. That tends to happen. If, on the other hand, Trump were to lose, it will be a safe Republican seat. But Iowa for Ernst to win. Minnesota, just because the odds are 4-1 or 5-1 for it to flip, and because Lewis has a history of overperforming, and the Democratic candidate is nothing like Klobuchar or Wellstone in depth of popularity. But X factor there is the Norwegian vote. Arizona, I still like McSally because the odds are 4-1, 5-1. So even if she should be an underdog, not that big of an underdog. Maine, I think Collins is going to hold, and again, she's a huge underdog there, so it's worth the odds.
Maine's so hard to poll, Robert. It's so hard to poll.
And by the way, Collins has always overperformed her numbers.
Yep, that's
absolutely. And even in these polls, they have her running 5 to 6 points better than Trump. If that holds up, she's winning Maine. Kentucky, any Republican state that's less than 90%, like McConnell in Kentucky, that's a lock. It's not close.
I know some stuff is just crazy, brother. It's just crazy.
Okay, this is how it feels on the night before the election.
I don't worship capitalism. I worship God, like whatever, I'm a Christian, but leaving that aside, this is not a religion. It's a mechanical, you know what I mean?
People can have better
structure.
lives.
Exactly right. But if your system is making it impossible for my children to get married, then I am totally happy to set your system on fire and blow it up.
Okay.
Not too long ago, a teacher in France chose to show those insulting cartoons to his class at a school. And of course, some of the Muslim students who were there were very annoyed and upset, and they objected, as did their parents. And they spoke up, but nobody bothered listening to them. Nobody paid any attention to them. Then about a week ago, it is said, and I repeat, it is said, that a young Muslim man confronted this cursed individual. He confronted this evil-spirited man. He confronted this filthy excuse of a human being on the street, and he beheaded him. Right now, we are angry at what these filthy people are doing. So one of the things that you and I can do is to boycott all French products and services. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الكفرة والمشركين اللهم دمر أعداء الدين وأهلك الزنادقة والملحدين اللهم انصر المجاهدين في سبيلك في كل مكان اللهم أهلك اللهم دمر الإسلام والمسلمين. People are doing. So one of the things that you and I can do is to boycott all French products and services. Allahumma a'izz al-Islam.
Allah gives strength to Islam and
Muslims. والمسلمين وأذل الكفرة والمشركين اللهم دمر أعداء الدين وأهلك الزنادقة والملحدين اللهم انصر المجاهدين في سبيلك في كل مكان اللهم أهلك كل من أساء لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم أهلك كل من أساء إلى رسولك صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم أهلك كل من أساء لرسولك صلى الله عليه وسلم.
So he thinks the beheading was a wonderful thing, and he's a Canadian imam. How would you like to have him living in your community, having his mosque in your community? Be pretty lit, right? Okay, what if Trump didn't quit after losing?
Peaceful transferal of power after the election.
Well, we're going to have to see what happens.
President Trump has some concerns about the upcoming election.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see.
That you will absolutely accept the result of this election.
I will look at it at the time.
He thinks the Democrats will corrupt the voting ballots, and if that appears to cost him the election, he might not give up his power so easily.
He will not give up power. Under no circumstances will he give up power. He intends to serve at least 2 more terms.
But how would that work? If a sitting president loses fair and square, can they still dispute the results and refuse to leave office? Does the government have a peaceful solution for this? Or would he have to be removed by force? This is What If, and here's what would happen if President Trump loses and refuses to leave. Many people think that the military would be the ones to force a defeated president from office.
I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
But that's not the case. If there are any disputes over the outcome of an election, it's up to the U.S. court system and the U.S. Congress to resolve them, not the U.S. military. But what if the president doesn't trust their decision either? Would it take a civil uprising to get him out? Or is there a more sophisticated process already in place? Only 22% of Americans believe that the upcoming election will be free and fair. There are many reasons for this skepticism, including potential corruption and tampering of the process. And even without those, the United States electoral system is already overcomplicated and has lots of room for dispute. Just look at 2016, where the candidate with the most votes did not win the election. One of the main reasons that the system is so complicated is because of something called the Electoral College. In most American elections, individuals are elected by popular vote. But the president and vice president are chosen by electors in the Electoral College. Every state gets a number of electors based on their number of members of Congress. There are 538 electors in total, and each state's political party chooses its electors. A presidential candidate needs at least 270 electors to win the presidential election. When someone votes for president, the vote goes into a statewide tally. In most states, all the elector votes go to the winner of that tally. The Constitution does not require the electors to follow their state's popular vote, but many states' laws require it. However, there have been cases where electors challenged the laws and voted against the popular opinion. With all this considered, you can see how this electoral process has lots of room for controversy. So, let's say President Trump loses fair and square this November, but he says the results aren't clear enough for him to accept. What would happen next? Well, on January 20th, he would skip the inauguration on Capitol Hill and instead would declare that the election was rigged. The U.S. military would salute President Biden, meaning that Trump could no longer command them to do anything. If he tried to, and some members obeyed him, they would be tried and convicted on mutiny and sedition charges. Foreign leaders would cut off relations with the U.S. ambassadors, awaiting instructions from President Biden. Biden's acting attorney general would write up arrest warrants for President Trump, with charges of criminal trespassing at the very least. Trump could remain in the Oval Office, but it would soon be cut off from power. But this is all essentially a best-case scenario. In reality, things could get a lot more complicated as civilians might get involved. If Trump says that the election was rigged, his passionate followers might take to the streets. We've seen people explicitly declare support for Trump or use his slogans during acts.
Yeah, Trump supporters, they're the ones most likely to hit the streets and start rioting and looting. What kind of world are you living in? All the rioting and looting in the United States over the past 50 years has been by Democrats.
To violence before. So what would stop some of his more extreme supporters from rallying together to fight back for him this time? Any act of violence here could further separate the public into Democrats and Republicans even more severely than they are now. And if the civilians don't trust the government to fix things, could this lead to another civil war? Well, let's hope it doesn't get that bad. Regardless of who wins this election, a lot of people are going to be upset. But what's important is that the U.S. finds a way to move forward to become...
Yeah. Guys, what's important is that we find a way to move forward and, just love each other.
Separated by less than 3 points in the average of polls from 6 key battleground states in a race that is shaped up to be tighter, and it has tightened over the last 2 weeks, and certainly more so than many people expected it to be. Watch this.
Every one of these battleground states are going to be extraordinarily close tomorrow night, even if they all end up moving in one direction.
Here now with that was checked out obviously from NBC, here now with their predictions for tomorrow night. Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary under President Trump and author of Leading America, and he's also former RNC, and Juan Williams, co-host of the 5.
Yeah, who cares what these guys have to say? All right, I admit that was a bad choice.
No, I would make James an underdog, but not the size of the underdog that he is in the betting market.
Here,
Montana, I think the Bullets made a range of mistakes, so I think Republicans will hold Montana. Alabama somehow is sometimes less than 95 or 96%. There's no chance Alabama's flipping to the Democrats. It's flipping to the Republicans. North Carolina, again, Tillis is an underdog. I think he wins outright. I think Republicans do hold the Senate. I don't think there's a Democratic sweep. And what I'm betting on is between our Republicans gaining 2 seats and Democrats gaining 2 seats. You can bet on those metrics. And I'm betting against Democrats winning 4 or more because I don't see the Senate flipping. The idea that they'll pull, they basically think they're going to flip Maine, flip Colorado, flip Arizona. What was the 4th state they think they're going to? And then they think they'll get at least 1 or 2 upsets between Iowa and Georgia and Alaska and Montana. And, some of them think,
not getting Iowa. It's over.
Yeah, I was finished.
It's over.
And Ernst did a good job in the debates there. And I am a little bit more suspect of Seltzer. I've been having a little. Here's why. Seltzer's had a habit of not having if the Republican is doing well, she tends to not show it until the eve of election. That's all I'm going to say. So
I'm with you. Look, Robert,
it starts to become a little bit of a pattern, especially after what she did in the caucuses.
This is what I'll say. I'm going to say this. We polled the same time Seltzer polled and found Trump +10. We also it was like +9. All right, so right there with her. Then she came out with a Biden +2 or a Biden +2 or something when we were still Trump +3. All right, I don't know how that happened when she overstated Trump the first time. It just.
Independents don't flip by 25 points either.
They don't do that, Robert. They don't.
She keeps getting Democratic-leaning independents or something the election.
Yeah, it's response bias or something. I don't know, but she should know that. I mean,
something with those weights.
And then the spiking of the CNN poll.
No, the Democratic caucuses was showing Biden collapsing, and her eve of where she got her reputation actually wasn't general elections. It was predicting the Democratic caucus performance, not the Republican caucus performance, where her polls have been off consistently.
She was an outlier with Obama, and she nailed it, or got very close. And look, even
in 2016, she says showed that very close when other people. And so people are like, wow, she's got this voodoo reputation. She really nails it. And so her coming out saying Biden collapsing could have been the end of Biden's campaign.
Yeah.
And they buried the poll based on some nonsense about.
Okay, here's a quick survey of Trump and neo-reactionary thinking from
Comes to the presidency of Donald Trump, there are many of us who have been disappointed by the lack of a counter-revolution to oppose what is currently being called cancel culture, which is simply another name for the enforcement of social justice. Prior to the coming 2020 presidential election, questions on how things have gone wrong must be answered. Many have declared that Donald Trump has betrayed his voter base, but I don't find this story very compelling. For the betrayal story to be true, the basic hypothesis is that there would have to be something offered, either implicitly or explicitly, that Trump did not have access to before his presidency. Considering his known associations with the upper echelons of the elites, it is difficult to imagine what possible interest of Trump's could have been achieved through the means of presidential betrayal that could not have been achieved before. This hypothesis puts every action Trump has taken into the space of insincerity, and fails to explain actions like his recent executive orders against critical race theory. It is clear that Trump threatens the cathedral at least a little bit, and therefore, even if at best he merely shines a light on such things, it wouldn't make sense for him to do this unless he were not part of the cathedral. Without telepathic powers, we will never truly know Trump's motivations, or what transpired to cripple the Trump administration. At best, we can test a hypothesis logically using theory. With the application of neo-reactionary theory, we can offer a hypothesis with more specific explanatory power. Mencius Moldbug has in the past related corporations.
Okay, Brittany Pettibone, who is married to Martin Sellner in Austria, she tweets, there's a horrific shooting unfolding right now in Vienna. She tweeted this 3 hours ago. I can hear the police sirens from my apartment. The Austrian Interior Minister says the shootings appear to be a terrorist attack with multiple perpetrators.
To monarchies, particularly corporations that follow hereditary succession in ownership. The Trump Organization is, of course, one such company. The owner of a company, especially as a sole proprietor and CEO, can expect that his orders will be obeyed. A company, especially of significantly large size, may have internal power struggles and competition in the lower levels, but all sovereignty ultimately rests in the CEO. As a principal owner of the Trump Organization, Donald Trump could basically expect that his orders would be followed in good faith. The incentive structure of a company is such that it is usually within your individual interest to follow the chain of command and act in a manner that benefits the company. The President of the United States, as the chief executive, may be similar in name and intended function as the CEO of a corporation, but the president isn't nearly so powerful. Some companies have an accountability framework above the CEO, commonly a board of directors. Even in such a case, the CEO generally still enjoys broad freedom to execute his will within this accountability framework. The United States perhaps was intended to have an accountability framework via the separation of powers, but it has degenerated into a managerial framework. And the path to this was written in the U.S. Constitution itself. In Article 2, that which describes the powers of the executive, Section 2 reads, quote, "He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and councils, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other."
Okay, so political scientist Helmut Norpoth predicted Trump's 2016 victory with his primary model, and using that same model again, he predicts Trump has a 91% chance of winning re-election against Joe Biden. All right, let's go to Baris here and Bob.
3 or 4 people getting some numbers wrong, which they
tell you what that
reason.
Just from a pollster's point of view, and it's not because of some right-wing pollster, even Patrick Murray at the Monmouth poll called BS on this. That one interviewer maybe spoke to a handful of people. That's it. They could have easily parked those responses, junked them, and then just ran for another day or whatever, put somebody else in the seat. That is not how this works. All right. The idea that maybe one interviewer had a question cut off or a name cut off from the screen because they had their zoom in too much, so you spiked the whole poll. Folks, that's crap. They're lying. I'm sorry. They're lying. There's no other explanation, and I'm stunned. Of course, they are the client, so if they spike it, but she made it out like it was Seltzer and company's decision to pull that poll. And so if it was her client's decision and they made her go along with it, why on earth did she take the fall for that? When, if it was me and that was the Epoch Times, it would have been like, they spiked that poll. It belongs to them, so they can release it or not, because it's not my property anymore, because that's how it works when you poll for a media outlet. It's not my property, or any client. It's not my property anymore, so have at it. But I found, there's no reason why we couldn't have just maybe what? Really, what are we talking about? Maybe 10 to 25 respondents? So what? So what? Easily could have fixed that. It just made no sense. In the House, though, I will say this. Iowa is always, or has been in the past, a bellwether in the House. I'm not saying it's enough for Republicans to take the House. I'm simply not saying that. But I am saying that the Seltzer poll did lend credibility to the Bloomberg story about at least 8 Democrats who thought they were safe now fighting for their political lives. And that means there are seats that are, and by the way, doesn't that blow a hole in Mr. Wasserman block you? Doesn't that blow a hole in his whole theory about the district level polling? Listen, when it was Trump plus 10, Republicans were going to take all 4. Now they're taking 3 out of 4. And by the way, if Trump overperforms, they may still take them. So that's a seat that's gone already. That's one seat that it's gone. So obviously what she is saying there nicely is you were first.
Okay, so looking at the Spectator, Amber Athey. She writes, Democrats get last-minute election jitters. The Biden campaign's ground game seems a little too late. Biden campaign is far from confident heading into Tuesday's election, and their behavior proves it. It's not uncommon for campaigns to blitz multiple states with TV ads and rally appearances in the final few days for the election. Trump, for example, has been holding multiple rallies per day in key swing states. However, Joe Biden's last-minute rush to turn out the vote stands in stark contrast to his months-long strategy of sitting back and letting Trump talk his way out of victory. Yeah, why is Joe Biden suddenly rushing out onto the campaign trail? Clearly, the Joe Biden campaign is feeling serious unease with the latest polls and is second-guessing its decisions to keep Joe in his basement for so long. Biden kept perhaps his biggest weapon, Barack Obama, on the back burner for months. In the last 2 weeks, though, Biden has sent Obama to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida. Pennsylvania, Obama was set to convince black males to turn out for Joe Biden. Recent polls reveal why the campaign may be worried about this usually safe Democratic demographic. A Power Interfaith Coalition poll showed that 14% of males under the age of 50 in Philadelphia intend to vote for Trump. 9% are undecided. Combine that with Trump repeatedly hammering Biden for saying he'd eventually get rid of oil, the riots in Philly, and a Pittsburgh Post-Gazette endorsement of Trump, it's no wonder that Biden felt the need to add multiple public appearance events in Pennsylvania to his schedule and to snatch up new TV ads. Real head-scratcher is why Biden thought he could make up any ground by employing Lady Gaga's help on the Rust Belt campaign trail. Superstar singer cut one of the most horrendous ads of the cycle, in which she wore a camouflage crop top, black and pink wrestling boots, American flag printed sunglasses, stood in front of a pickup truck, took a sip of beer before smashing the full can and throwing it on the ground while urging swing staters to vote for Biden. It was the Biden campaign's version of Hillary Clinton telling the Breakfast Club that she always carried hot sauce in her purse. Then Lady Gaga joined Joe Biden in Pittsburgh because no one appeals more to blue-collar voters than a woman who wastes good meat by fashioning it into a dress. Okay, who is the blonde reporter on Fox right now? I'm sure her name was there on the screen. NBC poll released Monday confirms the Pennsylvania race is tighter than Biden would have hoped at this time. He leads by just a 5-point margin, and that advantage is within the margin of error. Poll also shows them tied in Arizona. Trump campaign revealed during a press call Monday they are expecting the president to do very well in Pennsylvania based on their election day models. They're expecting him to win by 350,000 votes, which is probably more than the Democrats can cheat in Pennsylvania. Campaign is predicting similar election day margins in other key states. They project Trump has an election day advantage of over 400,000 net votes in Ohio, 400,000 in Michigan, 500,000 in Florida, 100,000 in Wisconsin, and 50,000 in Nevada. Election day is going to look like a Trump rally. Director of Battleground Strategy Nick Traynor has said Trump victory in Florida could be spurred by high support turnout among Latino voters in the southern part of the state. This voting bloc has grown significantly since 2016. According to Traynor, the Biden campaign said Monday during a Zoom call the president is within one state of winning the election. That's a marked difference from the confidence portrayed by the Trump campaign on their own call. This realization from the Biden campaign has spurred a Democratic strategy to delegitimize the election day results. Democrats are panicking because Joe Biden has not run up a large enough lead in early votes in battleground states. They know President Trump's in-person votes on Election Day will make up the difference and propel him to victory. Biden's political operatives have already been distributing talking points and research to delegitimize Election Day results by coaching surrogates to refer to the president's election day success as a red mirage. Biden campaign is a team of lawyers prepared to challenge the results, and that Americans should not be surprised to see them try to count mail-in ballots that were turned in late or not properly filled out. Fortunately for the Democrats, too little, too late campaigning, celebrity endorsements, and illegitimate cries of voter fraud don't make up for a lack of voter enthusiasm and a poorly developed ground game. They have every right to be nervous heading into Election Day. Okay.
First term and only term representative. You're gone. And it'll be a short career. Enjoy it. But that's what happens. In 2018, they took those districts from Republicans. They took that district from Republicans. So, and the rest of the country didn't go so well for them. That you have to think. Then Minnesota, we're talking about similar demographics here. You have to think the district in Minnesota. You have to think, I don't know if we can apply that totally to some areas in Pennsylvania, but I have seen Trump's no college share now. I'm not talking about white. I'm talking about no college overall. Now just about the slap 60. And that is where he needs to be, because that means with whites, he's at like 62. So that is where it's got to be, folks, for them to cause an upset. It really is.
And for that, here's the House. Two things on the House. I'll have individual House seat predictions.
I'm never going to raise the white flag of surrender. We're going to beat this virus, and we're going to get it under control, I promise you. The first step to beating the virus is beating Donald Trump.
National correspondent Jackie Heinrich has been with the Biden campaign throughout this entire process. She's done an amazing job. And you're now one night, Jackie, from this election. So you are in Pittsburgh, where the former vice president held his third campaign event of the day. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Martha. Yeah, Joe Biden is on his way here to his third and final event. His second stop wrapped just a short while ago. It was a drive-in rally at the border of two neighborhoods, one mostly white and wealthy, the other mostly black and lower income. And Joe Biden focused on calling out what he sees as bad behavior that's been normalized by President Trump. He ticked off a number of moments he says defines his presidency, including during the first presidential debate, when asked to address the hate group, the Proud Boys, the president told that group to stand back and stand by. Joe Biden said that Trump refuses to denounce white supremacy. He can't say the words Black Lives Matter. And he said that Americans deserve a president that people can look up to.
Look, we're done with the chaos. We're done with the racism. We're done with the tweets, the anger, the hate, the failure, the irresponsibility. Donald Trump has done more to harm black America than any president in modern history. This is the same man who started the birther movement against my buddy Barack Obama. This is the first man, this is a man who, when the first black woman running for vice president, he looks at her and he calls her a...
And remember, Barack Obama can't stand Joe Biden. So they're far from buddies.
Monster.
I think about the families I met. Biden promised to address issues disproportionately affecting black Americans, including the pandemic, lack of economic opportunity, and police and justice reform. And his comments come as Senator Kamala Harris works to drive black voter turnout in Philadelphia, where softer black support for Hillary Clinton contributed to her 2016 loss. Democrats were also reportedly spooked by weaker than expected turnout among black voters in other key cities like Miami. So Biden will wrap up his campaign in Pittsburgh, the same place that he started it in August of last year. And you'll remember in that very first campaign speech, he said that President Trump won through white working class voters who he says they abandoned. The president and his administration abandoned through policies that mostly favored wealthy people and Wall Street. Biden called himself a union man. He said if he's going to beat Trump in 2020, it's going to happen here in Pittsburgh. And in that speech, he took a veiled shot at Hillary Clinton, saying that voters here just didn't think that she understood them. So Biden's final pitch is one of unity, trying to tell voters of all stripes that he sees them. Martha.
Jackie, thank you very much. Jackie Heinrich in Pittsburgh tonight with the Biden campaign. We had hoped to bring you an interview with Vice President Mike Pence at this time. Unfortunately, we had technical difficulties at the rally in Traverse City, Michigan. He could not hear us. We could not hear him. So we're sorry about that, but we look forward to talking with him soon. But the good news is that our friend Britt Hume has jumped into the chair to join us and with his thoughts tonight. Britt, you have spent many nights, and now I have two by this time, looking ahead to Election Day tomorrow. It's interesting listening to Jackie Heinrich's report from Pittsburgh, and Joe Biden's really his closing argument is sort of twofold. He's got COVID was mishandled, and then he has, it's time to put behind us the chaos, put behind us the tweets, put behind us the racism. You heard his list there. How do you think he's doing in his closing argument?
Well, I think those two are probably the right arguments for him to make. I mean, the best, the notion that Donald Trump mishandled the COVID-19 outbreak is widely held. It consistently shows up in the polls that that's what a majority of people think. I mean, I think, for my part, that I think Trump has a defensible case on that issue, but I'm not sure he's made it very well. In the meantime, of course, all the division and the strife and the tumult and the controversy and the turmoil and the meanness of these past several years, and I'm not blaming Trump exclusively for it, is something people want to see the end of. So if you come along and say, this guy blew the big health crisis, and he divided us terribly, and I'm going to end all that, that's probably an appealing argument to a great many people, and that's what he's been running on.
What's your feel for this race tonight as you look at it?
Well, I think, I think the pollsters have probably learned some lessons from 4 years ago, and we'll find out how well they learned them and what they were come tomorrow or tomorrow night or maybe beyond tomorrow night. Yeah. But there's some very interesting things happening. I mean, for example, we're given to believe by the Trump campaign that they have gone out and registered thousands, if not millions, of voters who were for Trump but didn't vote in 2016. How many of them are out there? Who knows? How many will actually end up voting? We don't know that either. But when pollsters are doing these surveys and they're basing it on likely voters, they ask a lot of questions. One of the questions is, did you vote the last time? And if you didn't, you may not be included in a likely voter survey. So we don't know. There may be a big, Trump vote out there we don't even know is there. I don't know that. I don't know what to think about that. Yeah. Then of course you see these spontaneous demonstrations in favor of Trump in the form of these motor rallies that are broke out spontaneously, no effort from the campaign all across the country. People lining up in these long cavalcades with Trump banners and so forth. I don't know what that tells you, but it's not something that we're accustomed to seeing, is it? So there's cross currents here. Trump has made up some ground in my view. We don't know yet whether that's the normal tightening you see at the end of a race or whether it means something more. We'll find out.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I want to play this Bernie Sanders soundbite because there's been a lot of questions, obviously, about Joe Biden and where he would be as a president. With Kamala Harris by his side as vice president if they do win tomorrow night. This is interesting. Let's hear it.
We understand that electing Biden is not the end all. It is the beginning. Okay. And I think as the result of the work that all of you have done, Biden's proposals in this campaign are a lot stronger than they were in the primary. We're not giving up on our agenda. We organize our people to make sure that Biden becomes the most progressive president.
You think they'll have the pull to do that, Brett?
Well, I have my doubts. Actually, probably the best thing that could happen to Joe Biden would be for his party not to get control of both houses of Congress. Because I think Biden, by history, is not hard left. He's left, but not hard left. Bernie's hard left. Mm-hmm. And he made peace with Bernie by, including a lot of Bernie Sanders ideas in his party's platform. So I think what would happen is if they don't get control, Biden has an excuse that may satisfy the left. If they get control of everything and he doesn't do what the left wanted, they may be held to pay for him.
Britt, thank you. Great to see you as always.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Great to have you here tonight. So it is the last full day of the campaign for President Trump. Up next, he's in Kenosha, Wisconsin. You can see them setting up there. He's going to hold a fourth rally of the day, and then he's got another one after that. We'll be right back.
Okay. Let's check in here with a little bit more from Bonds.
Here's the context. In 3 prior elections, there has been a sweep out of power of the incumbent party when the incumbent sought re-election. Yeah. What happened in that next House election? Well, in 1946, Republicans won by 8 the national House vote. In 1948, Democrats took back the House and won by 7, 15-point swing. Yeah. 1994, Republicans win the House vote by 7. And what happened in 1996 ended up being dead even. Now, because of because of the regional effect, my Democratic friends would say gerrymandering.
Yeah. They gerrymandered the entire 20th century. They get a little bit of medicine, their own medicine, and they cry like babies. That's the truth.
Exactly. So the national vote was +0 in 1996. Republicans held the House, but it was a 7-point swing. Again, so 15-point swing in 1948 toward the incumbent party, 7-point swing in 1996. The next time this happened was 2012. Republicans won the House vote by 7 in 2010. They lost it by a point in 2012. Still managed to hold on because of that advantage that they have, but that was an 8-point swing. So if we get the lowest of those swings was 7 points, if we get a 7-point swing, given that the real popular vote was +70 because there was an unusual number of uncontested races in 2018, that would be +0. And +0, it means Republicans win the House. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but that gives you the historical comparison. People that think
Obama come back, Robert. He didn't win the House back, but we saw him take it some back. Yeah,
seats back. And the key factor in this is that in these latter 2 elections, the Republicans, since 1994, Republicans have an institutional edge in the House. In other words, there's more House seats. The average House seat is 4 points more Republican than the country. So what that means is typically, if it's D+3, Republicans take back the House in all likelihood, unless incumbency plays a role. Now, prior to 2018,
TIP doesn't do a generic ballot, right? But the USC does, right? And they had like an 8-point bias or 7-point bias in 2018.
Exactly, and they have it 8 points closer. If you take the USC poll, they have their generic ballot moving 8 points more Republican since their 2018 ballot.
Oh, that's seats, brother. That's a lot of seats.
And there's a whole bunch of other polls. Generally speaking, the generic ballot has been closer this year than 2018.
Yeah.
And remember that historically, they overfavored Democrats by 3 to 4 points in that generic ballot. In fact, the 538 average was overinflated Democrats even in 2018 by 3.5 points. They were predicting a 10.5-point polling win, which would have been the equivalent of a 12-point win given the uncontested races. Mm-hmm. So with that, what I'm betting against, you can bet against the Democrats winning 206 or more seats, 200 different ranges. But basically, I'm betting against Democrats having 234 or more seats. I do not believe Democrats are going to pick up net seats.
We're not saying the Republicans are going to flip the House. Did you not hear what we just said? The historic, if Trump wins re-election, history will say that they will recoup some of their losses. Yeah. But it will have to be an epic landslide for that.
If incumbency is inconsequential, like it was in 2018, then I believe Republicans will take back the House. Now, in 2018, I bet on incumbency mattering because prior to that, it always had. To give you an idea, here's what the curve would look like. It was like a U-curve. Let's say Democrats won by 7. In a typical midterm election, they would win by 10. Their Democratic incumbents would run 10 or 11 points above their typical margin, but Republicans would run, in the Republican-held incumbent districts, Democrats would only run 3 to 4 above their margin. There was a 3, 4 to 5 point Democratic edge. You can look at the Brennan Center put out in 2018 about this. So in 2018, and that didn't happen. On neither side. Democrats won by 7. In incumbent Democratic districts, they ran 7 points above average. In Republican incumbent districts, they ran 7 points above average. If that happens in 2020, then it's better than 50-50 Republicans take back the House. I'm not. To me, I still find it weird that incumbency was inconsequential in 2018.
There could have been a lot going on there, Robert. There were a lot of factors. Yes. And then they were parking. They did a very good psychological operation, basically all over the place where they needed to. They parked independent candidates that they funded and supported, and that appeals. There's a lot of research to suggest that there is, and now we've identified them. I think those independent, moderate, conservative men, they will not vote for the Republicans if you don't like. They'll vote for Trump, but they won't vote for a Republican candidate just because they have an R next to their name. If they see something like independent, they'll go, you know what? Let's go with that. That's just the way it is. So it'll siphon. We're talking only a few points, but Democrats won a ton of seats by only a few points.
The key for Republicans to take back the House is they need non-college, non-Hispanic, white independents.
Yeah.
Who self-identify as conservative in the Sun Belt, self-identify as moderate up north, that are voting for Trump for 95% or more to vote down ballot Republican. That may happen, but as Richard's seen in the polls, and so far the good news in the polls is they're not voting Democrat. The bad news is they're not voting Republican either. They're disproportionately on some ballot will play a major role. Now, to their advantage, Republicans have not made the heck mistake. Heck in Nevada killed his candidacy for the Senate by deciding to abandon Trump right before the election. All it did was sink him when people thought he was a lock to win, even with Trump losing Nevada.
He bought into the narrative we're hearing right now. That's what happened. He bought into that narrative.
My own view was never vote for a guy named Heck anyway.
Laura's cracking up. Can you answer this guy's question? How on earth is one able to legally bet on the race in the USA? Where does one start as an ultra beginner? And then we'll get the second one.
PredictIt.org. So I think it's an Australian based, but they're given a legal exemption in the United States. My view is political betting is not gambling. It's just like trading futures on the stock market, because true gambling legally in America is defined as a game of pure risk. So this was the debate that goes all the way back to fantasy football. Betting is not pure risk. It's not like I'm throwing a dice on the roulette wheel and seeing if it pops up Trump, Nevada. It's strategy and skill. And so from that perspective, I don't see it as gambling. It's in a gray zone. It's never legally been defined one way or the other. It was seen as probably legal by the Justice Department back when the Irish company Intrade was operating. But then the Justice Department didn't confirm that in 2016. So Intrade quit allowing U.S. markets, U.S. customers to be involved. If you're international, there's a bunch of books. Betfair is the best. But if you're inside the United States, the only one you can do so safely. Now, there are a bunch of sports books that will take your action around the world because they think it's legal from the United States. Bovada, Bet Online, a bunch of them. So for some people, that's where they're putting their money. But the only one where it's safe and legal and everybody agrees it's legal and there's no dispute, no controversy, no question, is PredictIt. Now, they limit how right now people are apparently so many people have bet on Trump in PredictIt that
they're not taking anymore.
Yes, the straight up Trump one they're not taking. But folks, there's a whole bunch of ways to bet on Trump. You can bet on him by state. You can bet on the Democratic winner of the South Carolina primary to not get elected. Democratic winner of Massachusetts, not because these are markets they designed for the primaries, but they still apply to the general election. You're betting against Biden, so it's the same thing. But those markets are less traded, so they haven't hit a cap. You can bet up to $850 per bet effectively.
That's a pro tip right there.
Yeah,
that's a pro tip. All right, so the chances that Trump wins Florida by 4, I mean, I don't know.
I have the median at 3. So I'm 0 to 6 because you can bet on Trump anywhere in that range, 0 to 6, and you're getting better than even money. So that's where the money is, because 6 or more I don't see happening. But under I think 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where I would put the range.
Because if everybody is totally wrong about MPAs, not everybody, by the way, not everybody. If they're wrong, all it would take for a 4-point win, given what we're seeing right now in Miami-Dade and Collier County. And did you see the villages, by the way? The idea that Biden is going to win that. Robert, I mean, we really delude ourselves. We really, the
guys that torch their reputation in this, Elliot Morris, 97% chance Biden wins. He put out some data that said, hey, one reason why was because Biden did well in white working class areas. And I was like, what is he talking about? And then I went back and looked. He's talking about the share of the vote Biden got while ignoring the fact that white working class turnout was down in the Democratic primary.
Absolutely. That's why he won Minnesota and Maine. That and the last minute rally cry to him. That's all. They weren't voting for him. And that's 35% right there, buddy. That's it.
Their turnout share was down. So to give people an example, I think some people misunderstood my presidential primary participation rate. It's not so much how much vote Trump gets versus the Democratic candidate. I look at that, but it's not the number one factor. To give you an idea, in 2012 in Wisconsin, Republicans got 2.5 more times voters than Obama did in the presidential primary. So that's not the only thing I do say is if Trump got more votes than the leading Democratic candidate did in the state, then that tends to be a barometer of trouble for the Democrat. That's true in Wisconsin.
98.2%.
Guess what else? For all those people saying Texas is flipping, Trump got more Republican presidential primary votes than the top 4 Democratic presidential primary candidates got combined.
Yep.
So the idea that Texas is flipping is living in la la land.
Those 293,000 Bernie votes in Wisconsin are just Biden's because they're Biden's. Were they not paying attention in 2016? Were they not paying attention?
Wisconsin's like Michigan is an open primary. So so a bunch of independents just tend to vote in whatever's the contested primary, but they're not locked in Democratic votes.
And in fact, we'd see that in the inference in the voter model, because that's why the voter models update folks, because they don't have registration. So the participation in those primaries is what knocked it more R. You understand what I'm saying? So people, they already knew, and that's baked into those Democratic numbers that I showed you before. And yet it is still R plus 8.
the fact that Trump got more votes than Biden in Wisconsin was a bad sign for Biden. Like if I was running Biden's campaign, that would make me highly sensitive to it. And when I look at its demographics, so like in Michigan did have great Democratic presidential primary turnout, but it was also the big contested race where independents could vote in the Democratic primary. Yeah. But the thing I paid attention to was you have a 25% increase in Democratic presidential primary voting, but the county that's down, that's around 10 to 15% increase is Wayne. Yeah. What it is that's showing black voters are not interested. Just like you had the surge of interest in Texas, 50% increase in Democratic presidential primary voting in Texas, but not in Mexican-American West Texas. So what that tells you is when you see lack of enthusiasm from minority millennials in the presidential primary process relative to other population groups in vote share, that almost always predicts what their turnout pattern is going to be. And the early vote has confirmed that to the nth degree.
Let me ask you this with this super chat. What the hell is with this drive-by voting? How are they allowed to do this? This is against the state law. I don't understand how the judge upheld this. This is crazy. And I know they got another emergency hearing. Did that judge rule yet or not?
Not to my knowledge. That judge is a real conservative Republican judge, so it was anticipated he might rule in their favor. But the flip side is the fact the Supreme Court refused to get involved. The choice of Justice Barrett sent a message. So Barrett not getting active and doing anything on the Supreme Court level. The Supreme Court, by the way, 7-0 Republican, and they refused to get active. So,
by the way, Lindsey Graham made an open comment about how, you remember that, Laura? He made an open comment the day of the debate, and he had said, you know what? It don't matter because they're not going to be counting those ballots anyway because Amy Coney Barrett will be on the Supreme Court. In other words, it was a wink and a nod to us that, don't worry, she's got our back. And
first vote she does is not vote at all. So and when Texas Supreme Court 7-0 Republican, when they see the U.S. Supreme Court saying don't get involved prior to the election, they follow the message. And they're like, even though there's issues about what happened with the ballots and how they were gathered in Harris County, Justice Barrett just said stay out effectively by her not voting. So they took the message. And that's what's happening. And so but none of that's going to flip it, folks. People that think Texas is competitive. Here's what's coming out on election day: about 700,000 to 800,000 working class rural whites in places like Van Zandt County, one of my favorite named counties in the country, that hill country, East Texas, old school populace. And if you look at the presidential primary rate, you know what kind of numbers are going to be coming out of those counties? They're going to look like core inner city precincts.
Okay, let's check in with Tucker Carlson. Oh, come on, man. Come on, man. We'll check in with Tucker Carlson as soon as I can get my tech together.
So much news, it is impossible to metabolize. Claims and slogans and rumors coming in from every direction. Been online recently? Checked your phone? It's overwhelming. We're going to have the very latest news throughout the hour tonight. But we want to begin a different way. We want to begin this show with a single image. Now, the image doesn't tell you who's going to win or lose tomorrow. Instead, it's a metaphor for the election itself and for the moment that we're living in and will continue to live in. The picture is from a town called Butler, Pennsylvania. It's 35 miles north of Pittsburgh. The president held a rally there over the weekend. Butler's like a lot of places you'll find in this country once you head inland from the coasts. It's a former industrial town. They made Pullman rail cars there for many years. But it's been losing population for decades. There's still a lot of nice people in Butler. For 60 grand, you can buy a decent house there. It's a place you might be happy in. But our professional class is not impressed by Butler. They don't consider Butler, Pennsylvania, or places like it, the future. To them, places like Butler are embarrassing relics of a past best forgotten. The men of Butler may have built this country, and they did, but they mean nothing to our leaders now. You can be certain of that because when large numbers of people in Butler started killing themselves with narcotics, no one in Washington or New York or Los Angeles said a word about it. And so it continued. There have now been so many opioid deaths in Butler that a few years ago, residents built an overdose memorial in the middle of town. MSNBC didn't cover that. So given all of that, it was interesting how the people around Butler feel about Donald Trump. Here are the pictures of the president's rally there on Saturday night. Tens of thousands of people came. So many people that the crowd obscured the horizon. It looked like a visit from the Pope. When was the last time a political speech drew that many people? Well, the media didn't ask. Instead, they attacked the rally as a super spreader event. Trump endangers thousands in Pennsylvania. Okay, we'll leave the epidemiology to CNN. But the question still hung in the air. Why did all those people come? Why? They must have known that Donald Trump is the most evil man who's ever lived. They've heard that every day for 5 years. They know that people who support Donald Trump are also evil. They're bigots, they're morons, they're racist cult members. They know that Americans have been fired from their jobs for supporting Donald Trump. Not to mention kicked off social media, belittled by their kids' teachers, shunned by decent society. Only losers and freaks support Donald Trump. People in Butler knew all of that. But on Saturday, they went to the Donald Trump rally anyway. Why exactly did they do that? We should be pondering that question deeply as we watch tomorrow's returns and as we live through the aftermath of them. Millions of Americans sincerely love Donald Trump. They love him in spite of everything they've heard. They love him often in spite of himself. They're not deluded. They know exactly who Trump is. They love him anyway. They love Donald Trump because no one else loves them. The country they built, the country their ancestors fought for over hundreds of years, has left them to die in their unfashionable little towns, mocked and despised by the sneering half-wits with finance degrees but no actual skills who seem to run everything all of a sudden. Whatever Donald Trump's faults, he is better than the rest of the people in charge. At least he doesn't hate them for their weakness. Donald Trump, in other words, is and has always been a living indictment of the people who run this country. That was true 4 years ago when Trump came out of nowhere to win the presidency, and it's every bit as true right now. Maybe even more true than it's ever been. And it will remain true, regardless of whether Donald Trump wins re-election. Trump rose because they failed. It's as simple as that. If the people in charge had done a halfway decent job with the country they inherited, if they cared about anything other than themselves, even for just a moment, Donald Trump would still be hosting Celebrity Apprentice. But they didn't. Instead, they were incompetent and narcissistic and cruel and relentlessly dishonest. They wrecked what they didn't build. They lied about it. They hurt anyone who told the truth about what they were doing. That's true. We watched. America is still a great country, the best in the world, but our ruling class is disgusting. A vote for Trump is a vote against them. That's what's going on in that picture. That's what's going on in this country. John Kennedy is a U.S. Senator from the state of Louisiana. We're happy to have him on tonight.
Okay, I'm not happy to have him on. I don't care what he has to say. Let me go here to a Twitter thread by Mark Halperin. A lot of people you'll hear over the next day are invested in an overtime election, and despite what they say, they can't imagine giving up Donald Trump one day sooner than necessary. But this presidential contest is actually quite simple, and Donald Trump is very much the underdog. So Mark Halperin, I think he used to be the political director for ABC News. So let's go through his Twitter thread. These are the states that Trump will win. Then these are the states he must win all of the significant 6. He must win Texas and Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. He must win all of the significant 6. If he loses one of those states, he will lose, according to Mark Halperin. If Trump won all of them, and they're all tight, you would then have this situation, and that would not be enough to win. He would still need more states. The most likely path at this point would be Pennsylvania and Arizona, in addition to his base states and the significant 6. So this would mean winning all 8 states in which he now appears even, a little ahead, a little behind, or a lot behind. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. An alternative path is less likely swapping Nevada for Arizona. Are there other Trump victory scenarios involving Michigan or Wisconsin? Sure, but they are even less likely. So you can watch the cable channel of your choice, on which many will try to fuzzy things up and pretend the race isn't over. If Trump loses one of the significant 6, because they want you to keep watching, but that would be misleading. If Trump can be at a win or no projection in the significant 6 states by the time the East Coast goes to sleep Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, then he can look to the Supreme Court of the United States to manufacture wins in Pennsylvania or Arizona. That is his main hope for re-election by any means necessary. As an opinion from Mark Halperin.
Voting for Obama in 2012. You're talking 94-6, 95-5. Absurd numbers. Numbers never seen since the 1940s. And back then on the Democratic side.
And Scott, as far as Georgia goes, I would be more worried if I was a Republican about Arizona next time. I really think that one was really close.
These people that think Georgia has to have a weird turnout. Look, folks, in 2018,
they got
governor. Plus 7 environment. That means it leans 7 points more Republican than the country. The same thing in Texas. Like when they're making all this big deal about Ted Cruz is within 3 points. I was like, folks, it was a D+7 environment. That means it's 10 points more Republican than the rest of the country.
So
almost exactly like
Joe
2016.
Biden,
So
Georgia, of the people who hope to take control of a government they believe they own. If Joe Biden were to lose tomorrow, what would happen exactly? What would his supporters do? Lisa Booth has been thinking about this and reporting on it for quite some time. She's a Fox News contributor, senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, and she joins us tonight with a preview of that unhappy possibility. Lisa, great to see you.
Hi, Tucker. Great to see you. Well, I do think Joe Biden will lose tomorrow night. I actually think Donald Trump is going to win this election. And what that's going to do to the Democratic Party is accelerate the rise of extremists that we've already seen underway since Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. So now you're not going to have just one establishment candidate that lost in 2016. You're going to have 2 establishment candidates that have lost. And look at even where the Democratic Party has come since 2016 alone. Medicare for All was considered outside of the mainstream in 2016. Now that's been normalized as just a normal, regular policy position of the left. But I think what's even more dangerous is it's not just socialism and not just socialist policy positions that the Democratic Party has embraced. It's extremist and it's violence. I mean, we're seeing that with either the direct embrace or the tacit embrace of extremist Marxists that are out in the street burning the American flag and setting cop cars ablaze, and Democrats who either embrace it or refuse to condemn it. So this is going to accelerate the rise of extremists in the Democratic Party.
I heard Mayor Ted Wheeler today. I read him say that the real threat we face is from white supremacists and other right-wingers raging through our cities this week. I hear a lot of people saying that. Has anyone called them on it? I mean, that's so demonstrably insane.
Well, I mean, they can't because the media is on side of the Democrat Party and they're essentially propagandists of the left. There is no truth anymore in the media. So you're not going to hear that. You're actually going to see the media carry that falsehood and try to draw false equivalencies between Trump supporters and these, anarchist Marxists that are out in the streets trying to destroy law and order in this country. And our country, as we know, look, we know Washington, D.C. isn't boarding up because they're worried about Trump supporters taking in the streets. They're worried about the continuation of the violence we have seen. And I think the great irony of what's going on right now, Tucker, is that the Republican Party is actually expanding. The Republican Party is becoming a big tent party. And I think Donald Trump is going to win more with blacks and Hispanics, working class voters. And the Democrat Party is narrowing. It's the party of extremists. It's the party of totalitarians that don't accept anyone if they don't bow down to that mantle on the altar of this violent extremist left.
They certainly demand total obedience. We're not giving it to them on this show. Lisa Booth, great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So that is a really interesting point you just heard. Cities across the country, cities in which there are like 9 Republicans total, are locking down plywood over the windows ahead of tomorrow. Why is that happening? Candace Owens joins us after the break. Plus, second half of our interview with actress Kirstie Alley.
Okay, I think that's going to do it for me for today.